The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel's blood ran cold as his CEO leaned closer, her perfume mixing with the scent of his own fear. 7 years of single fatherhood, countless sleepless nights, every sacrifice he'd made for Emma, all of it about to crumble because of one failed presentation. But what he heard wasn't what she meant. And what she meant would change everything. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stay until the very end. Drop a like if you're enjoying it, and comment the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. Pa. The fluorescent lights of Whitmore Media Group hummed with the particular frequency of corporate purgatory, that low, persistent drone that seemed designed to remind everyone beneath it that they were merely cogs in a machine built by someone else's vision. Daniel Brooks had worked under those lights for 4 years, and he'd learned to tune out most of the ambient misery that came with the territory. But today, at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening in late October, the humming felt like a countdown. He sat at his desk on the 32nd floor, staring at the wreckage of what was supposed to be his career-defining moment. The presentation slides were still open on his laptop screen, each one a monument to his failure. The Henderson account, a $40 million media campaign that could have secured his position at the firm for years, had slipped through his fingers like sand, and everyone had watched it happen. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson, Emma's after-school caregiver. Running a bit late picking up Emma. Traffic is terrible. She's asking when Daddy's coming home. Daniel's chest tightened. He typed back quickly. Tell her I'll be there soon, maybe an hour. It was a lie. He had no idea when he'd be home. Not after what had happened in that conference room. The presentation had started well enough. Daniel had spent 3 weeks preparing, 3 weeks of late nights after Emma went to bed, 3 weeks of rehearsing his talking points in the shower, 3 weeks of believing that maybe, just maybe, this was his shot to prove he was more than the exhausted single dad who always looked like he was running on fumes. But then Marcus Henderson himself had started asking questions. Pointed questions. Questions about market projections that Daniel had calculated himself. Numbers he'd triple-checked, figures that should have been bulletproof. Except they weren't. Somewhere in his sleep-deprived fog, he'd transposed 2 crucial data points, and Henderson had caught it immediately. These numbers don't add up, Henderson had said, his voice carrying the particular weight of a man who hadn't become a billionaire by missing details. Page 14 contradicts page 22. Which one is accurate? Daniel had frozen. The silence in that conference room had stretched like taffy, sticky and suffocating. He'd felt the eyes of his colleagues boring into him, some sympathetic, most hungry. This business attracted sharks, and blood in the water was blood in the water, regardless of whose veins it came from. The quarterly projections on page 14 reflect. He'd trailed off, his mind blanking completely. That was when Lauren Whitmore had stepped in. The CEO of Whitmore Media Group was not a woman who tolerated weakness. At 45, she'd built her company from nothing into a media empire worth $3 billion. She wore her authority like armor. Every perfectly tailored suit, every precisely chosen word, every measured glance designed to remind everyone in her orbit that she had earned her position through sheer ruthless competence. Mr. Henderson, she'd said, smoothly, rising from her seat at the head of the table. What Daniel is trying to explain is that we're currently reconciling our projection models to account for the recent shifts in digital advertising spend. The apparent discrepancy reflects our commitment to real-time accuracy rather than outdated forecasting methods. It was a save. A masterful, elegant save that bought Daniel enough time to gather his scattered thoughts and fumble through the rest of the presentation. But the damage was done. Henderson had left without committing, and everyone knew what that meant. Now Daniel sat alone in the increasingly empty office, waiting for the axe to fall. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a calendar notification. Emma's parent-teacher conference, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Another thing he'd probably have to cancel. Another way he was failing his daughter, Emma. Just thinking about her made something crack open in Daniel's chest. 7 years old, with her mother's dark curls and her father's stubborn chin, she was the only thing in his life that made any sense. Her mother, Sarah, had left when Emma was 18 months old, walked out one Tuesday morning with a suitcase and a note that said simply, "I can't do this anymore. She's better off with you." Daniel had never disagreed with that assessment, even if it had destroyed him to read it. Sarah had been drowning in postpartum depression that no one had caught in time, and by the time anyone realized how deep she'd sunk, she was already gone. She'd moved to Seattle, started over, sent birthday cards with increasingly generic messages and checks that Daniel never cashed. Emma called her the lady who sends cards, and had stopped asking questions about her around age 5. So Daniel had done what any desperate, terrified, utterly unprepared father would do. He'd figured it out. Day by day, disaster by disaster, he'd learned to braid hair and pack lunches and explain why some families looked different from others. He'd taken the job at Whitmore Media because it paid well and offered health insurance that covered Emma's asthma medication. He'd moved into a small apartment in a decent school district and learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and industrial quantities of coffee. He'd built a life, a fragile, exhausting, barely holding together life, but a life nonetheless. And now Lauren Whitmore was about to tear it all down. "Brooks," the voice came from directly behind him, and Daniel nearly jumped out of his skin. He spun around to find Jeremy Hollister, Lauren's executive assistant, standing with his trademark expression of mild disdain. "Ms. Whitmore would like to see you in her office," Jeremy said. "Immediately." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Now? It's almost 7. "I'm aware of the time, Mr. Brooks." "Mrs. Whitmore's schedule doesn't conform to conventional expectations. Neither should yours, if you'd like to remain employed here." The walk to Lauren's corner office felt like a death march. Daniel passed the empty cubicles of his colleagues, people who'd had the good sense to flee the building before they could be associated with his spectacular failure. The cleaning crew was already making rounds, their vacuum cleaners providing a funeral dirge for his career. Lauren's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the 32nd floor, a glass-walled monument to success that offered panoramic views of the Chicago skyline. During the day, sunlight streamed through those windows and illuminated the space like a cathedral. At night, with the city glittering below and the office lights dimmed, it felt more like an interrogation room. Lauren was standing at the window when Daniel entered, her back to the door. She'd removed her suit jacket and the sleeves of her silk blouse were rolled up to her elbows, a rare concession to informality that Daniel had never witnessed before. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, though that might have been a trick of the light. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Daniel obeyed, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Miss Whitmore, I want to apologize for what happened in the Henderson meeting. The data error was inexcusable, and I take full responsibility." Stop. The word cut through his rehearsed speech like a blade. Lauren finally turned to face him, and Daniel was struck by how different she looked outside the context of a conference room. The fierce CEO who'd built an empire through sheer force of will suddenly seemed smaller somehow, more human. There were shadows under her eyes that her careful makeup couldn't quite conceal, and something in her posture suggested a weight that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. "Sit down, Daniel." It was the first time she'd ever used his first name. Daniel wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a very, very bad one. He lowered himself into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, his palms sweating. Lauren didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the small bar cart in the corner of her office, another fixture Daniel had never seen her use, and poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey. She didn't offer him any. "Do you know how I built this company?" she asked, still not looking at him. "Through hard work and vision," Daniel offered, the words automatic. It was the company line, the origin story that appeared in every press release and profile piece. Lauren let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. "Through hard work and vision. Yes, that's the version we tell investors." She took a long sip of whiskey. "The real version is messier. The real version involves a failed marriage, a bankruptcy that almost destroyed me, and a daughter I haven't spoken to in 6 years." Daniel blinked. In 4 years at Whitmore Media, he'd never heard Lauren mention anything about her personal life. The woman was a cipher, a carefully constructed public persona that revealed nothing beneath the polish. I'm sorry," he said, because he didn't know what else to say. "Don't be sorry, be warned." Lauren finally turned to face him, and her eyes were sharp despite the whiskey. I built this company by sacrificing everything else. My marriage, my relationships, my daughter. She paused. My humanity, some would say. And for what? A corner office and a name on a building? Daniel's confusion must have shown on his face because Lauren's expression softened slightly, a microscopic shift that most people wouldn't have noticed. I've been watching you, Daniel, for months now. The word sent a chill down his spine. Watching me? You come in early, you stay late. You never complain, never make excuses, never ask for special treatment even when anyone with eyes can see you're running on empty. She set down her glass. You're raising that little girl alone, aren't you, Emma? Daniel's throat tightened. How do you know her name? I make it my business to know things about my employees, especially the ones who interest me. Lauren moved closer, and Daniel caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive and complicated, like the woman herself. I've seen the photos on your desk, the crayon drawings you've pinned to your cubicle wall, the way you check your phone every hour like you're counting down the minutes until you can see her again. Ms. Whitmore. Lauren, she corrected, if we're going to have this conversation, you might as well call me Lauren. Daniel's head was spinning. None of this made sense. He'd walked in here expecting to be fired, and instead his CEO was sharing personal revelations and inviting him to use her first name. I don't understand what's happening right now. Lauren studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. The corporate mask slipped further, revealing a woman who looked almost vulnerable. What's happening, she said slowly, is that I'm about to ask you for something, and you have every right to say no. Daniel waited, his heart pounding. The Henderson meeting was a disaster, Lauren continued. You know it. I know it. Everyone on that floor knows it. By tomorrow morning, the vultures will be circling, waiting to see if I'm going to cut you loose. She paused. I'm not going to do that. Relief flooded through Daniel so intensely that he felt dizzy. You're not? No. Because firing you would be the easy thing, the expected thing. And I didn't build this company by doing what people expected. Lauren moved to her desk and sat on the edge of it, closer to Daniel now than she'd ever been. I'm going to give you another chance, but it's going to require something from you in return. Daniel's relief curdled into wariness. What kind of something? Lauren took a breath. In the dim light of her office, with the city glittering behind her, she looked almost fragile. I've been working 18-hour days for 20 years, she said quietly. I have a penthouse apartment on Lakeshore Drive that I've slept in maybe 5 times this year. I have a net worth that most people can't even comprehend, and I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. She leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped. Take me home tonight, Daniel, or you're fired. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. His mind went blank, then filled with white-hot panic. Take me home. The phrase echoed in his skull, taking on shapes he didn't want to examine. This couldn't be happening. His CEO, his married, powerful, untouchable CEO, was propositioning him, using his job, his livelihood, his daughter's security as leverage. He stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. Miss Whitmore, Lauren, this isn't... Lauren's brow furrowed. Daniel, what? I have a daughter, he said, his voice cracking. I'm a single father. I would never... You can't ask me to. Daniel. Lauren's voice was sharp now, confusion replacing whatever vulnerability had been there before. What exactly do you think I'm asking? You said take you home or I'm fired. You're asking me to... He couldn't even finish the sentence. The humiliation was overwhelming, mixing with fear and anger and a desperate, clawing need to get out of this room. Lauren stared at him. For a long, terrible moment, she stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. And then something broke across her face, understanding, followed quickly by horror. Oh! The word was barely a whisper. Oh no, Daniel, no! That's not... She pressed a hand to her forehead, looking genuinely shaken. That's not what I meant at all. Daniel's panic didn't subside. Then what did you mean? Lauren stood and took a step back, putting distance between them. Her composure had cracked completely now, and the woman standing before him looked nothing like the polished CEO who struck fear into the hearts of executives across Chicago. "I meant literally," she said, her voice unsteady. "I meant I need someone to drive me home. My regular driver called in sick, and I've been drinking, and I haven't eaten anything all day, and I—" She stopped, looking almost embarrassed. "I get migraines when I'm exhausted, bad ones, the kind where I can't see straight. I was going to ask if you could drive me to my apartment, and in exchange, I would forget about today's meeting and give you another shot at proving yourself." Daniel stared at her. His brain was still trying to catch up to the shift in reality. "You just wanted a ride home?" "Yes." Lauren's voice was quiet. "Just a ride home. I'm sorry. I should have been clearer. I was tired, and I phrased it badly, and I never considered—" She shook her head. "I would never. I need you to understand that. Whatever you may think of me, I would never use my position to— No, I know," Daniel said quickly, though he wasn't sure he knew anything anymore. The adrenaline was still coursing through his system, making it hard to think. "I'm sorry. I jumped to conclusions. It's been a long day, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and when you said those words, You assumed the worst." Lauren nodded slowly. "I suppose I can't blame you. The worst is usually what happens in situations like this, isn't it?" There was something in her voice, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Daniel found himself looking at her differently now, seeing past the power and the polish to the person underneath. A woman who'd been working for 20 years and couldn't remember the last real conversation she'd had. A woman who'd sacrificed everything for success and now stood in her beautiful office alone. "I can drive you home," he heard himself say. Lauren looked up, surprised. "You don't have to. I can call a car service." "You said you have migraines, and you've been drinking, and you haven't eaten." Daniel wasn't sure where this courage was coming from, but he pressed forward anyway. "Let me drive you. It's the least I can do after—" He gestured vaguely at the air between them, indicating the horrible misunderstanding that still hung there like smoke. "What about your daughter?" "I'll call Mrs. Patterson. She can stay late." Lauren hesitated. For a moment, Daniel thought she was going to refuse, reassert her authority, rebuild the walls that had crumbled in the last few minutes. But then something in her softened. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." The ride down to the parking garage was silent. Daniel had texted Mrs. Patterson, who'd agreed to stay with Emma until he got home, though her response had carried a distinct tone of long-suffering patience. He'd apologized profusely and promised to pay her extra, and she'd sent back a single eye-roll emoji that somehow conveyed both affection and exasperation. Lauren's car was a Mercedes S-Class, sleek and black and worth more than Daniel's annual salary. She handed him the keys without comment, and he slid into the driver's seat with the particular reverence of a man who'd been driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic for the past 5 years. "Lakeshore Drive," Lauren said, settling into the passenger seat. "The address is in the navigation system." Daniel pulled out of the parking garage and into the Chicago night. The city sprawled around them, all glittering towers and rushing traffic, a symphony of ambition and exhaustion playing out on every street corner. He drove carefully, aware of the precious cargo he was carrying and the astronomical insurance deductible he couldn't afford. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it carried weight, the residue of what had happened in Lauren's office, the misunderstanding that had briefly stripped them both of their pretenses. "Can I ask you something?" Lauren's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Of course." "Why did you assume that?" "What I said. Why did you immediately jump to that conclusion?" Daniel gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "Because that's how it usually works, isn't it? People in power using that power to take what they want. It happens all the time in this industry." "Has it happened to you before?" "No, but I've watched it happen to others. And I know what I look like to most people, a stressed-out single dad barely keeping his head above water, an easy target." Lauren was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "that I made you feel that way, even for a moment." Daniel glanced at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "It's okay. It was a misunderstanding. It's not okay. Words matter. especially from someone in my position. She turned to look out the window, her reflection ghostly against the lights of the city. I forget sometimes that I'm not just Lauren anymore, that I'm Lauren Whitmore, CEO, with all the weight that carries. They drove in silence for another few blocks. Then Lauren spoke again. The daughter I mentioned, her name is Rachel. She's 23 now. She hasn't spoken to me since her father and I divorced, and she chose to live with him full time. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. I told myself I was doing the right thing, Lauren continued, giving her space, not forcing a relationship she clearly didn't want. But the truth is, I was afraid. I'd spent so many years building the company that I didn't know how to be a mother anymore. The skills don't transfer, it turns out. I'm sorry, Daniel said. That must be painful. It is. Lauren's voice was matter of fact, but Daniel could hear the hurt underneath. Every single day, it is. The navigation system announced their upcoming destination, and Daniel turned onto Lakeshore Drive. The buildings here were nicer than anything he'd ever lived in, gleaming towers of glass and steel that overlooked the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. This is me, Lauren said as he pulled up to a particularly impressive building. A doorman was already moving toward the car, ready to assist. Daniel put the car in park but didn't move to get out. There was something he needed to say, though he wasn't entirely sure what it was. Thank you for not firing me, he finally managed. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm grateful for it. Lauren turned to look at him directly, and in the soft glow of the car's interior lights, she looked younger somehow, less guarded. Everyone deserves a second chance, Daniel. I've had more than my share. She paused, her hand on the door handle. I meant what I said earlier, about watching you. You're a good man, a good father. Those things matter, even in a business that likes to pretend they don't. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about your wife, about having to do this alone. Daniel blinked. How did you? I told you, I make it my business to know things. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Good night, Daniel. She was halfway out of the car when Daniel heard himself speak. Have you eaten? Lauren froze, one foot on the pavement. Excuse me? You said you haven't eaten all day, and you've been drinking, and you're about to go up to that apartment alone. Daniel wasn't sure what he was doing, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. I need to pick up my daughter from her caregiver's house. If you wanted, it's not fancy, but we could stop somewhere and... Are you inviting me to dinner, Daniel? There was something in Lauren's voice that he couldn't quite identify. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. I'm inviting you to come with me to pick up my daughter and then maybe eat something before you pass out from low blood sugar. He shook his head, suddenly embarrassed. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. You're my boss and I shouldn't have... Yes. Daniel stared at her. Yes? Yes. I'd like that. Lauren pulled her foot back into the car and closed the door. I'd like that very much. Mud. Mrs. Patterson's house was a modest two-story in a quiet neighborhood on the south side. Daniel had found her 3 years ago through a recommendation from another single parent at Emma's school, and she'd become something like family since then. The grandmother Emma had never had, the safety net Daniel desperately needed. When he pulled up in the Mercedes, Mrs. Patterson emerged onto her front porch with Emma at her side. The older woman's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline as she took in the luxury vehicle, and Daniel could practically see the questions forming in her mind. Daddy! Emma launched herself off the porch and ran toward the car, her dark curls bouncing. She was still wearing the purple dress she'd picked out for school that morning, though it was now decorated with what appeared to be finger paint and chocolate. Daniel caught her in his arms and lifted her up, breathing in the familiar scent of kid shampoo and playground dirt. Hey, Peanut, sorry I'm late. Mrs. Patterson let me have extra cookies because you took forever. Emma squirmed to look at the car. Daddy, whose car is this? It belongs to someone I work with. Daniel hesitated, suddenly aware of how strange this was going to sound. She came with me to pick you up. Emma's eyes went wide. You brought someone from work to pick me up? Before Daniel could respond, the passenger door opened and Lauren stepped out. She looked profoundly out of place in this neighborhood. her designer clothes and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the modest homes and chain-link fences. But something about her posture suggested she wasn't uncomfortable, just different. "Hello?" Lauren said, approaching them. "You must be Emma. I've heard a lot about you." Emma studied her with the particular intensity of a 7-year-old encountering something new. "You're pretty," she announced. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" "Emma!" Daniel felt his face flush hot. But Lauren just laughed. An actual laugh, warm and genuine, nothing like the polished chuckles she deployed in meetings. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who works with your dad. My name is Lauren." "That's a pretty name, too." Emma looked at her father. "Can we get ice cream?" Daniel opened his mouth to say no. It was late, it was a school night, and ice cream for dinner was exactly the kind of irresponsible parenting he tried to avoid. But then he caught Lauren's expression, and something made him reconsider. "How about we get something to eat?" he said instead. "Something more than ice cream." "Ice cream counts as eating," Emma pointed out reasonably. Mrs. Patterson had made her way to the car by this point, her curiosity apparently overwhelming her discretion. "Daniel, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just a long day at work." He pulled out his wallet and handed her several bills, more than he'd agreed to pay, but she'd earned it. "Thank you for staying late." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were fixed on Lauren with the particular scrutiny of a woman who'd raised 4 children and could spot trouble from a mile away. "You take care of yourself, Daniel, and take care of that precious girl. Always." They bundled into the Mercedes, Emma in the back seat, vibrating with excitement about the fancy car and the mysterious woman who'd appeared in her life. Daniel pulled away from Mrs. Patterson's house with the distinct sensation that he'd stepped through some kind of portal into an alternate universe where nothing made sense. "There's a diner on the next block," he said. "It's not fancy, but the food is good and they're open late." "A diner sounds perfect," Lauren said. She half-turned in her seat to look at Emma. "What's your favorite thing to eat at a diner?" "Pancakes," Emma said immediately. "With chocolate chips and whipped cream. And how about we save the pancakes for breakfast?" Daniel interjected. "It's almost bedtime." Emma pouted but didn't argue. "Fine. Can I get a grilled cheese?" "You can get whatever you want, Peanut." The diner was called Lucky's, and it had been a fixture of the neighborhood for 40 years. The booths were cracked red vinyl, the menus were laminated and sticky, and the coffee was strong enough to dissolve a spoon. Daniel had been coming here since he'd moved to the neighborhood, and the staff knew him by name. "Danny!" The hostess, an older woman named Dolores, beamed at him as they entered. "And little Emma, where's your—" She stopped short when she saw Lauren, her smile flickering with confusion. "Table for 3? Please." Dolores led them to a corner booth, and Daniel watched Lauren slide into the cracked vinyl seat like she was settling into a throne. She looked completely out of place, a woman who probably hadn't eaten at a diner since the 90s, if ever, but there was no condescension in her expression, just curiosity. "This is nice," she said, looking around at the faded photographs on the walls and the ancient jukebox in the corner. "It has character." "It has cholesterol," Daniel said. "But yes, character too." Emma had already grabbed a crayon and was drawing on her placemat, a stick figure family that she'd been perfecting for months. Daniel watched Lauren's eyes linger on the drawing, something flickering in her expression that he couldn't quite read. "So Lauren," Emma said without looking up from her artwork, "do you have any kids?" The question hit like a punch. Daniel saw Lauren flinch, a tiny movement that most people would have missed. "I have a daughter," Lauren said carefully. "She's all grown up now." "What's her name?" "Rachel." "That's pretty. Does she like pancakes?" Lauren's smile was sad. "I don't know, actually. It's been a long time since I asked her." Emma looked up, her brow furrowed with the particular seriousness of a child who'd just encountered something she didn't understand. "You should ask her. Pancakes are important." "Emma," Daniel started, but Lauren held up a hand. "You're right," she said to Emma. "Pancakes are important. I should ask her." The waitress arrived, a young woman named Marisol, who'd been working at Lucky's while she finished nursing school. She took their orders, grilled cheese for Emma, turkey club for Daniel, soup, and salad for Lauren, and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving them in a silence that felt strangely comfortable. "Tell me about your day, Peanut," Daniel said to Emma. "What did you learn at school?" "We learned about dinosaurs," Emma announced. "Mrs. Henley says that T-Rex had tiny arms and couldn't even hug things. That's sad." "That is sad," Lauren agreed. "Did you learn about any other dinosaurs?" Emma launched into an enthusiastic explanation of Triceratops and Velociraptors, and something called a sneakotops that Daniel was fairly certain she'd invented. Lauren listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making appropriately impressed sounds, and Daniel found himself watching them with a strange feeling in his chest. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Tonight was supposed to end with him clearing out his desk, updating his resume, and trying to explain to Emma why Daddy needed to find a new job. Instead, he was sitting in a diner booth watching his CEO bond with his daughter over fake dinosaurs and approaching grilled cheese sandwiches. The food arrived, and for a while, conversation gave way to eating. Emma attacked her grilled cheese with the particular ferocity of a hungry 7-year-old, while Lauren ate her soup with careful, deliberate spoonfuls. Daniel watched her over his turkey club, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one who'd terrorized conference rooms and sent executives scrambling. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. Lauren looked up. "Of course." "Earlier, when you were talking about your daughter, about Rachel," Daniel hesitated. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Lauren set down her spoon. For a long moment she didn't say anything, and Daniel wondered if he'd crossed a line. But then she sighed, and her shoulders dropped slightly. "What happened was that I chose my company over my family," she said quietly. "Over and over again, for years. I missed recitals and birthdays and parent-teacher conferences because there was always another deal, another crisis, another reason why the company needed me more." She shook her head. "By the time I realized what I'd sacrificed, it was too late. Rachel was 18 and she hated me, and I couldn't blame her. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I made my choices. I have to live with them." Lauren glanced at Emma, who had moved on from her grilled cheese to the coloring page on the back of the placemat. "That's why I've been watching you, Daniel, because you're doing what I couldn't do. You're putting your daughter first, even when it costs you." "It's not costing me anything," Daniel protested. "She's the most important thing in my life." "Exactly." Lauren's eyes were bright. "That's exactly my point. For you, it's obvious. It's not even a question. But for me..." She trailed off, looking down at her soup. "For me, it was always a question. And I always chose wrong." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The weight of her confession hung in the air between them, heavy with regret and loneliness. "Daddy?" Emma's voice broke the silence. "Yeah, Peanut? Can Lauren come to my school play?" "It's next week." "I'm playing a tree." Daniel's eyes snapped to Lauren's face, expecting her to politely decline, to reestablish the boundaries that had somehow dissolved over the course of this strange evening. But Lauren looked genuinely touched. "I would love that," she said softly, "if it's okay with your dad." Emma turned to Daniel with the particular expression she used when she wanted something very badly. Big eyes, slight pout, chin tucked down. It was devastatingly effective, and she knew it. "We'll see," Daniel said, because he didn't know what else to say. "That means yes," Emma informed Lauren confidently. "He always says we'll see when it's yes. When it's no, he says, I don't think so, Peanut." Lauren laughed again, and Daniel found himself smiling despite everything. His daughter had a way of cutting through tension that no adult could match. "We should get you home to bed," he said to Emma. "It's late, and you have school tomorrow." "But I'm not tired," Emma protested, even as she yawned hugely. They paid the bill. Daniel tried to grab it, but Lauren was faster, leaving a tip that probably equaled the entire cost of their meal. Outside, the autumn night had turned cold, and Emma shivered in her thin jacket until Daniel wrapped his own around her shoulders. "Thank you," Lauren said as they walked back to the car. "For tonight. I can't remember the last time I had a meal that felt like this." "Like what?" She considered the question. "Normal," she finally said. "Like a normal person having a normal dinner with normal people. No agendas, no negotiations, no one trying to get something from me." She paused. "It was nice." Daniel strapped Emma into the back seat, where she promptly fell asleep against the window. He stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking at Lauren in the glow of the streetlights. "What happens now?" he asked. "Tomorrow, at the office." Lauren's expression shifted, the warmth receding slightly as the professional mask started to reassert itself. "Tomorrow you'll come to work. You'll do your job. And in 2 weeks, we have another shot at the Henderson account. I'd like you to lead that presentation." Daniel blinked. "After what happened today?" "Today was a mistake. Mistakes can be fixed." Lauren's eyes held his. "But I need you to understand something, Daniel. Tonight, it doesn't change anything about our professional relationship. At the office, I'm still your CEO. I still expect excellence. I still won't tolerate excuses." "I understand." "Good." She started toward the passenger side of the car, then paused. "But for what it's worth, I'm glad I got to meet Emma. She's a wonderful little girl. You've done well with her." "Thank you. That means a lot." They drove to Lauren's building in comfortable silence. When they arrived, she gathered her things and turned to face him one last time. "Good night, Daniel. I'll see you in the morning." "Good night, Lauren." She got out of the car, walked to the building entrance, and disappeared inside without looking back. Daniel sat in the parking space for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. Finally, he put the car in drive and headed home. Emma was still asleep in the back seat, her soft breathing the only sound in the quiet car. Daniel looked at her in the rearview mirror. This fierce, funny, endlessly resilient little girl who'd somehow chosen him to be her father, and felt his heart crack open with love. Whatever happened next, whatever this strange night meant for his future, he would figure it out. He always did, because that's what fathers did. They figured it out. Daniel carried Emma up the 3 flights of stairs to their small apartment, her head lolling against his shoulder. She was getting too heavy for this, he realized with a pang. Soon she'd be too big to carry, too old to fall asleep on him, too grown to need him the way she needed him now. He laid her on her bed, removed her shoes, and pulled the covers up to her chin. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" "I'm here, Peanut." "I like Lauren," she murmured. "She has sad eyes, but she's nice." Daniel smoothed the curls away from her forehead. "Yeah, she is nice. We should be her friends. She seems like she needs friends." "Go to sleep, Emma." "Okay." Her eyes closed, and within seconds, her breathing had deepened into true sleep. Daniel stood in the doorway of her tiny room, looking at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, and the pile of stuffed animals in the corner, and the drawings taped to every available surface. This cramped, chaotic space was everything he had, everything he'd built, everything he'd fought for. And somehow, impossibly, it had survived another day. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stood at the window looking out at the city. Somewhere across that sprawl of lights and concrete was Lauren Whitmore, alone in her penthouse apartment, surrounded by success and suffocating in solitude. What a strange world, Daniel thought. What a strange, complicated, impossible world. He went to bed with too many thoughts churning in his head and not nearly enough answers. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't lie awake counting his failures. Instead, he found himself thinking about second chances, about unexpected kindness, about a little girl who thought everyone deserved to be asked about pancakes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The office would still be full of sharks. His career would still be hanging by a thread. The weight of single parenthood would still press down on him every single minute of every single day. But tonight, something had shifted, and for now that was enough. The next morning arrived too quickly, dragging Daniel from fragmented dreams into the harsh reality of his alarm clock screaming at 5:45 a.m. He lay in bed for exactly 30 seconds, staring at the water stain on his ceiling that had been there since he moved in, trying to convince himself that last night had actually happened, that his CEO had eaten grilled cheese with his daughter at a Vinyl Booth diner, that she'd actually laughed, at Emma's dinosaur facts, that she'd looked at him like he was something other than a replaceable cog in her corporate machine. The apartment was cold. The heating system in this building was temperamental at best, and October had decided to remind Chicago what winter felt like. Daniel pulled on a sweatshirt over his t-shirt and padded to Emma's room to begin the daily ritual of coaxing a 7-year-old out of bed. "Peanut, time to wake up." Emma burrowed deeper under her covers, presenting him with nothing but a tuft of dark curls. "5 more minutes." "You said that 5 minutes ago." "Then 5 more after that." Daniel sat on the edge of her bed and gently pulled back the blanket. Emma's face was scrunched in protest, her eyes squeezed shut against the intrusion of morning. "I had a dream about dinosaurs," she mumbled, "and Lauren was there. She was teaching the T-Rex how to hug with its tiny arms." Daniel smiled despite himself. "That sounds like quite a dream." It was. The T-Rex was very grateful. Emma finally opened her eyes, blinking up at him. "Is Lauren going to come to dinner again?" "I don't know, Peanut. She's very busy." "Everyone's busy. That doesn't mean they can't eat." There was a logic to that which Daniel couldn't argue with. He helped Emma pick out her clothes for the day, a negotiation that involved rejecting 3 princess dresses before settling on jeans and a sweater with a cat on it, and then moved to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The morning routine was a choreographed chaos that Daniel had perfected over years of practice. Cereal poured while coffee brewed, lunch packed while Emma brushed her teeth, hair braided while she ate, a skill Daniel had learned from YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning when Emma was 4 and had demanded to look like a princess for her first day of preschool. By 7:15, they were out the door and walking to the bus stop. Emma chattered about her upcoming day, a spelling test she was nervous about, a friend named Sophia who had gotten new light-up sneakers, the tree costume she was supposed to try on for the school play. Daniel listened and nodded and made appropriate sounds of engagement, but part of his mind was already at the office, already bracing for whatever awaited him there. The bus arrived, and Emma climbed aboard with the confidence of a child who had no idea how precarious her father's position in the world actually was. Daniel watched until the bus turned the corner, then headed for the L station. The train was packed with the usual morning commuters, tired faces staring at phones, bodies pressed together in reluctant intimacy. Daniel found a spot near the door and held on to the pole, letting the rhythm of the train rock him toward downtown. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "The Henderson account meeting has been moved to November 15th. I've attached the revised briefing materials. Please review before end of day." L. Daniel stared at the message. Lauren Whitmore had his personal phone number. Lauren Whitmore was texting him directly, bypassing the usual chain of assistants and coordinators. Lauren Whitmore had signed off with just the initial of her first name, as if they were colleagues, as if they were friends. He typed back a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, he settled on, "Received. I'll review today. Thank you. Professional. Appropriate. Completely inadequate for expressing the confusion swirling in his chest." The Whitmore Media Group building rose 40 stories above the Chicago streets, a monument of glass and steel that caught the morning light and threw it back at the city like a challenge. Daniel had walked through those revolving doors 1,000 times, but today felt different. Today he was hyper-aware of every glance from coworkers, every whispered conversation that stopped when he approached, every sideways look that seemed to carry judgment. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt endless. When the doors finally opened, Daniel stepped out into the familiar landscape of his professional life and immediately sensed that something had shifted. Brooks, Marcus Chen, one of the senior account managers, was waiting by the elevator bank. His expression was unreadable. "Walk with me." Daniel fell into step beside him, his stomach tightening. "What's going on?" "You tell me. Whitmore's assistant just sent out a memo reassigning you to the Henderson account team, effective immediately." Marcus glanced at him sideways. 3 days ago, you were dead in the water. Now you're leading one of the biggest pitches of the year. What happened?" "I honestly don't know." "Well, whatever you did, keep doing it. The vultures were circling, Danny. Half the floor was already dividing up your accounts." Marcus stopped at the corner of the hallway, his voice dropping. "Just be careful. Whitmore doesn't do favors. If she's putting you on Henderson, she has a reason." "What kind of reason?" "That's what worries me." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the corridor with more questions than answers. The morning passed in a blur of emails and meetings. Daniel threw himself into the Henderson materials that Lauren had sent, studying every page until the numbers started to swim before his eyes. The revised pitch was good, better than good. Someone had taken his original concept and refined it, smoothing the rough edges while keeping the core vision intact. He wondered if Lauren had done that herself. At noon, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Lauren. My office. 1 o'clock. No explanation. No context. Just a summons. Daniel spent the next hour alternating between reviewing the Henderson documents and trying not to spiral into anxiety. By the time 12:55 rolled around, his palms were sweating and his heart was doing something that probably wasn't medically advisable. He knocked on Lauren's door at exactly 1 o'clock. Come in. She was sitting behind her desk this time, fully restored to CEO mode. The vulnerable woman from the diner was nowhere in evidence. In her place was the polished professional who'd built an empire, perfectly coiffed, impeccably dressed, radiating an authority that made Daniel want to stand up straighter. Close the door, sit down. Daniel obeyed, settling into the same chair he'd occupied last night. The office looked different in daylight, less intimate, more imposing. The walls of glass that had seemed beautiful in the darkness now felt like they were designed to remind everyone below that they were being watched. I've reviewed your revised approach to the Henderson account, Lauren said, her tone crisp and businesslike. It's solid work. The market segmentation analysis in particular shows real insight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Solid isn't enough. Henderson is considering 3 other agencies for this campaign, and all of them have longer track records and deeper pockets. If we're going to win this, we need to be exceptional. Daniel nodded, his professional instincts kicking in. I've been thinking about that. Henderson's company has been in the news lately for some labor disputes at their manufacturing facilities. If we position the campaign around corporate responsibility and authentic stakeholder engagement, we could differentiate ourselves from the competition while also helping them address their reputation issues. Lauren's eyes sharpened with interest. Go on. The other agencies will pitch the standard playbook: celebrity endorsements, social media saturation, influencer partnerships. But Henderson didn't become a billionaire by following the playbook. He built his company by taking risks that other people thought were crazy. If we show him something unexpected, something that actually addresses his real problem instead of just selling more product, we might have a shot. For a long moment, Lauren just looked at him. Daniel couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if she was impressed or skeptical or something else entirely. That's a risky strategy, she said finally. You'd be essentially telling a client that his company has an image problem. His company does have an image problem. Everyone knows it. The question is whether we're going to pretend otherwise or actually help him fix it. And if he doesn't like hearing that, then we lose the account. But we were probably going to lose it anyway with a conventional pitch. Daniel leaned forward, feeling a surge of conviction he hadn't experienced in months. Look, I know I'm not in a position to be taking big swings right now. After what happened in that meeting, I should probably be keeping my head down and playing it safe. But you said you wanted exceptional. This is the only way I know how to be exceptional. Lauren was quiet for another long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. Not the professional smile she deployed in meetings, but something realer, something warmer. This is why I didn't fire you, she said. This right here. You're not afraid to tell me the truth, even when the truth is inconvenient. Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. So you want me to move forward with this approach? I want you to develop it fully. I want a complete presentation by November 10th, 5 days before the meeting. And I want it to be the best work you've ever done. It will be. Good. Lauren's expression shifted slightly, the professional mask flickering. Now, for the other matter. Daniel's stomach tightened. Other matter? Last night. Lauren stood and walked to the window, her back to him. I want to be clear about something. What happened last night, the dinner, the conversation, that was unusual for me. I don't typically share personal information with employees. I don't typically eat at diners. I don't typically meet their children. I understand. I'm not sure you do. She turned to face him, and for just a moment, Daniel saw the vulnerable woman from the night before, the one who'd confessed to losing her daughter and building an empire out of loneliness. I'm trying to say that I don't regret it. any of it. But I also need to maintain certain boundaries, for both our sakes. Daniel nodded slowly. Of course, professional boundaries. I completely understand. Do you? Lauren's eyes searched his face. Because your daughter invited me to her school play, and I said yes. And now I'm not sure if that was appropriate or if I was just so starved for normal human connection that I agreed to something I shouldn't have. The honesty of it caught Daniel off guard. He'd expected corporate doublespeak, careful distancing, a reassertion of hierarchy. Instead, she was being real with him, again. Emma would be disappointed if you didn't come, he said carefully. But she's 7. She'd get over it. What matters is what you actually want to do. What I want. Lauren laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've spent so long thinking about what the company needs, what shareholders want, what the market demands. I'm not sure I remember how to think about what I want. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it is. She walked back to her desk but didn't sit down. The play is next Friday, correct? Yes. 7 p.m. at Lincoln Elementary. I'll be there. Lauren said it like she was announcing a business decision, final, non-negotiable. But this needs to be the last personal interaction until after the Henderson pitch. I can't have anyone in this company thinking you're getting special treatment because of a personal relationship. Daniel felt something deflate in his chest, though he couldn't quite name what it was. That makes sense. I'm glad we understand each other. Lauren's professional mask was fully back in place now, impenetrable. You can go. And Daniel, the Henderson presentation. Don't let me down. I won't. He left her office feeling like he'd just survived a conversation that happened on multiple levels simultaneously, only some of which he understood. The professional part was clear: deliver on Henderson, prove his worth, earn his place. But the personal part, the part about boundaries and starving for connection and not knowing what she wanted, that part lingered like smoke. The rest of the afternoon disappeared into work. Daniel threw himself into the Henderson materials with a focus he hadn't felt in months, mapping out the new strategy, pulling data to support his arguments, sketching the outline of a presentation that might actually win them the account. It was past 7 when he finally looked up from his computer and realized the office had emptied around him. His phone showed 3 missed texts from Mrs. Patterson. Emma asking when he was coming home, what she should have for dinner, whether he'd forgotten about her again. Daniel cursed under his breath and scrambled to pack up his things. The commute home felt longer than usual, every red light and delayed train adding to his guilt. By the time he walked through the apartment door, it was nearly 8:30. Emma was in her pajamas on the couch, watching a cartoon with the volume turned low. Hey, Peanut, I'm so sorry I'm late. Emma looked up at him with an expression that was becoming too familiar, resignation mixed with disappointment. Mrs. Patterson made me mac and cheese. She said you had important work. I did, but that's not an excuse. Daniel sat down beside her and pulled her into a hug. I should have called. I should have left earlier. I'm sorry. It's okay, Daddy. But her voice was small, and Daniel felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. This was the trap. The impossible balance between being a good employee and being a good father. Every hour he gave to work was an hour stolen from Emma, and every hour he gave to Emma was an hour that might cost him the job that kept them both fed and housed. He'd been walking this tightrope for 7 years, and some days it felt like the wire was getting thinner. Tell me about your day, he said, trying to change the subject. How was the spelling test? Emma brightened slightly. I got 9 out of 10. I missed necessary. It has too many letters. 9 out of 10 is great. I'm proud of you. Mrs. Henley said I could have done better if I studied more. But I don't like studying. It's boring. Daniel smiled despite himself. Most things worth doing are a little boring sometimes, but you still have to do them. Is your work boring? Sometimes, but sometimes it's interesting. Today was interesting. Because of Lauren? The question caught him off guard. Why would you think it was because of Lauren? Emma shrugged with the particular nonchalance of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for. You were happier last night than you've been in a long time, even when you were worried about being late, and Lauren was there, so I figured she makes you happy. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The observation was too perceptive, too close to something he wasn't ready to examine. "Lauren is my boss," he said carefully. "She's important to my job. That's why I was thinking about her today. But she's also nice, and she has sad eyes. And you like helping people with sad eyes." Emma yawned hugely. "I think you should be her friend. Everyone needs friends." "I think you're too smart for your own good," Daniel said, ruffling her hair. "And I think it's way past your bedtime." Emma didn't argue, which told Daniel just how tired she was. He carried her to bed, she was definitely getting too heavy for this, and tucked her in with the usual routine. 3 stuffed animals arranged just so, nightlight turned on, goodnight kiss on the forehead. "Daddy?" Her voice was already thick with approaching sleep. "Yeah, Peanut." "I'm glad you didn't get fired." Daniel's throat tightened. "Me too, sweetheart, me too." He stood in her doorway for a long moment after she'd fallen asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. This was why he did everything, why he endured the stress and the exhaustion and the impossible demands. This small person who trusted him completely, who depended on him for everything, who looked at him like he could solve any problem in the world. He couldn't let her down. He wouldn't. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel worked on the Henderson presentation like a man possessed, staying late at the office and waking early to review his notes. The strategy was taking shape, a bold reimagining of corporate messaging that positioned Henderson Industries as a leader in workplace reform rather than a company with labor problems to hide. It was risky. It was unconventional. It was exactly the kind of approach that could either win them the account or get him fired for real this time. Lauren kept her distance, as promised. They passed each other in hallways without acknowledgement, sat in the same meetings without making eye contact. To the rest of the office, nothing had changed. Daniel Brooks was still the single dad who'd nearly tanked the Henderson pitch, and Lauren Whitmore was still the untouchable CEO who ran her empire with an iron fist. But Daniel knew better. He saw the way Lauren's eyes flickered to him when she thought no one was watching. He noticed how she arrived at meetings just late enough to avoid small talk with him. He caught the slight tension in her shoulders whenever they were in the same room. She was as aware of him as he was of her. And that awareness crackled between them like static electricity, dangerous and undeniable. Friday arrived faster than Daniel expected. The morning was a chaos of last-minute Henderson revisions and a frantic search for Emma's tree costume, which had somehow gotten buried under a pile of laundry. By the time Daniel dropped Emma at school, with the costume safely in her backpack and strict instructions not to lose it, he was already running 20 minutes behind. The day at work was mercifully light. Most of the Henderson preparation was done, and Daniel spent his time reviewing the presentation one final time, making small tweaks that probably didn't matter but made him feel more in control. At 5 o'clock, he packed up his things and headed for the elevator. "Daniel." He turned to find Lauren standing in the hallway outside her office, looking slightly uncertain, an expression he'd never seen on her face at work. "The play is at 7?" she asked. "Yes, at Lincoln Elementary. The address is—" "I know the address. I'll be there." She hesitated, then added, almost reluctantly, "I'm looking forward to it." Daniel smiled. "Emma's been practicing her tree stance all week. I think she's planning to be the most dramatic tree in the history of school theater." Something softened in Lauren's expression. "I wouldn't expect anything less." They stood there for a moment, neither quite willing to end the conversation. Finally, Lauren cleared her throat. "I'll see you there," she said, and disappeared back into her office. Daniel rode the elevator down with his heart beating faster than it should have been. This was just a school play. Just his daughter dressed as a tree. Just his CEO keeping a promise she'd made to a 7-year-old over grilled cheese sandwiches. Nothing more. Lincoln Elementary was a squat brick building that had been educating Chicago children for nearly a century. The auditorium was smaller than Daniel remembered from parent-teacher conferences, but it felt enormous when he walked in and saw the rows of folding chairs filled with parents and grandparents and siblings, all buzzing with the particular energy of an elementary school performance. He found a seat near the middle, saving the one beside him with his jacket. Mrs. Patterson was somewhere in the back. She'd insisted on coming to see Emma perform, even though Daniel had told her she didn't need to. The woman had become more like family than an employee over the years, and Daniel had long ago stopped pretending he could do any of this without her. At 6:55, he felt someone slide into the seat next to him. Lauren was dressed differently than he'd ever seen her. Jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Without the armor of her corporate wardrobe, she looked younger, softer, more like the woman from the diner and less like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Daniel said quietly. "I said I would." "I know, but saying and doing are different things." Lauren looked at him directly, and there was something in her eyes that made Daniel's breath catch. "When I make a promise, I keep it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Before he could respond, the lights dimmed and the curtain rose on a stage decorated with construction paper trees and a painted backdrop of a forest. The play was about the seasons, a simple story about how nature changes and grows and adapts to whatever comes. Emma's role as tree number 3 required her to stand very still for most of the performance and then slowly shed paper leaves during the autumn scene. She was, as promised, the most dramatic tree in the history of school theater. Every leaf drop was accompanied by a tiny sigh of loss. Every gust of wind made her sway with the intensity of a Broadway star. When the winter scene arrived and she had to pretend to be bare and cold, Emma hugged herself and shivered with such commitment that several parents in the audience laughed. Daniel watched his daughter shine and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for years. Beside him, Lauren was transfixed. Her eyes never left the stage, and Daniel could see emotions flickering across her face. Wonder, sadness, something that looked almost like longing. When Emma took her bow at the end of the performance, Lauren clapped harder than anyone. After the show, there were refreshments in the cafeteria, store-bought cookies and fruit punch in paper cups. Emma came running out of the backstage area still wearing her tree costume, her face flushed with excitement and pride. "Daddy, did you see me? Did you see when I lost my leaves? I practiced that so many times." "I saw you," Daniel said, scooping her up into a hug. "You were amazing. The best tree I've ever seen." Emma squirmed to look past him. "Lauren, you came." Lauren stepped forward, and Daniel saw her eyes glistening slightly. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything. You were incredible, Emma." "Really? You really think so?" "Really. The way you swayed in the wind, professional actors couldn't have done it better." Emma beamed with the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that only children could produce. "I'm going to tell Sophia you said that. She was flower number 2, and she thinks she was the best." Daniel set her down, and she immediately grabbed Lauren's hand, tugging her toward the refreshment table with the confidence of a child who decided someone was part of her world now. "Come on, they have cookies." Daniel watched them go, the strange sight of his CEO being led through a school cafeteria by his daughter in a tree costume. Lauren looked back at him once, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement of how surreal this was, how unexpected, how unlike anything either of their lives was supposed to contain. At the refreshment table, Emma introduced Lauren to Sophia and Sophia's mom with the casual pronouncement that, "This is Lauren. She's my dad's friend from work, and she's really important." Sophia's mom looked confused, clearly trying to reconcile the woman in jeans with the idea of someone really important. Lauren handled it with grace, complimenting Sophia's performance as flower number 2 with apparently genuine enthusiasm. Daniel hung back, watching. There was something happening here that he didn't fully understand, something that went beyond professional courtesy or keeping a promise to a child. Lauren was engaged in a way that seemed to surprise even her, asking Emma questions about her costume, laughing at her jokes, looking at this ordinary school event like it was something precious and rare. Maybe to her, it was. "She seems nice," Mrs. Patterson said, appearing at Daniel's elbow with 2 cups of fruit punch. "Your boss." "She is nice," Daniel said, "when she lets herself be." Mrs. Patterson's tone was knowing. "She looks at you like you're water in a desert." Daniel nearly choked on his fruit punch. "What?" "I may be old, Daniel, but I'm not blind. That woman is carrying something heavy, and when she looks at you, she sets it down for a minute." Mrs. Patterson patted his arm. "Just be careful. Hearts don't always listen to good sense." Before Daniel could respond, Emma was running back to them, dragging Lauren behind her. Daddy, Lauren says she knows how to French braid. Can she teach you? Because your braids always come out funny, and Sophie's mom says they look like you did them with your feet. Sophie's mom said that? Well, she said it to Sophie, and I heard it. Emma tugged on Lauren's hand. Will you teach him, please? Lauren looked at Daniel with an expression that was half apology, half something else entirely. I did mention that I know how to French braid. I used to do Rachel's hair when she was young. The mention of her estranged daughter hung in the air for a moment, heavy with unspoken history. You don't have to, Daniel said quietly. I know I don't. Lauren's voice was soft. But maybe I want to. They ended up in a corner of the cafeteria, Emma sitting cross-legged on a chair while Lauren demonstrated the technique on her dark curls and Daniel watched, trying to memorize the movements. It was an ordinary moment, a woman braiding a child's hair, a father learning something new, but it felt extraordinary. It felt like the beginning of something that neither of them had words for. When the braid was done, Emma examined it in the reflection of a window and declared it the prettiest braid in the whole world. Lauren's smile in response was the most genuine thing Daniel had ever seen from her. We should go, Daniel said finally, aware that it was getting late and Emma had school tomorrow. Emma needs to get to bed. Of course. The warmth in Lauren's expression flickered, replaced by something more guarded. Thank you for inviting me, both of you. Thank you for coming, Daniel said. It meant a lot. To Emma. And to me, he didn't add. But from the way Lauren looked at him, he suspected she heard it anyway. They walked out to the parking lot together, Emma skipping ahead, still wearing her tree costume over her regular clothes. The night was cold and clear, the Chicago skyline glittering in the distance like a promise of something bigger than this ordinary school and this ordinary life. I meant what I said, Lauren said as they reached her car. About the Henderson pitch needing to be exceptional. I know. But I also meant what I said about tonight, about being glad I came. She paused, her hand on the car door. I've built my entire life around work, Daniel, around success and achievement and proving something to people who probably stopped caring years ago. Tonight was the first time in longer than I can remember that I did something just because it made me happy. Daniel didn't know how to respond to that kind of honesty. So he did the only thing that felt right. He reached out and squeezed her hand just briefly, a gesture of connection that said more than words could. See you Monday, he said. See you Monday. She drove away, and Daniel stood in the parking lot with his daughter until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Emma looked up at him with eyes that were wise beyond her years. Daddy? I think Lauren needs a family. Daniel crouched down to her level. What makes you say that? Because when she braided my hair, she was crying a little bit. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind you do when something's really nice and you didn't know you wanted it. Daniel pulled her into a hug, marveling at how this small person understood things that most adults couldn't see. Come on, Peanut, let's go home. The weekend passed quietly. Daniel worked on the Henderson presentation while Emma played and did homework and asked approximately every 3 hours when she was going to see Lauren again. He didn't have a good answer for that question, so he gave vague responses about Lauren being busy and work being complicated. But the truth was, he thought about her constantly. About the way she'd looked watching Emma perform, about the tears she'd hidden while braiding a child's hair, about a woman who'd traded her humanity for an empire and was only now realizing what she'd lost. Monday morning brought a return to normalcy, or what passed for normalcy in Daniel's life. The office hummed with the usual energy. Coworkers traded the usual gossip, and Lauren Whitmore was back behind the walls of her corner office, once again the untouchable CEO. But something had changed. Daniel could feel it in the way she nodded to him in the hallway, a barely perceptible acknowledgement that they shared a secret. He could see it in the way she smiled when she thought no one was looking, like she was remembering something that made the world a little brighter. The Henderson presentation was coming together. Daniel had 3 more days to refine it, 3 more days to prepare for the pitch that would either save his career or end it. He threw himself into the work with a focus born of desperation and hope. On Wednesday, he was called into Lauren's office for a review of the presentation. The meeting was professional, efficient, exactly what it needed to be. Lauren asked pointed questions and made sharp suggestions and pushed him to defend every choice. It was the kind of rigorous preparation that made people better, and Daniel found himself rising to meet her expectations. But at the end of the meeting, as he gathered his materials to leave, Lauren spoke again. "How's Emma?" The question surprised him. They were supposed to be maintaining boundaries, keeping things professional, but he couldn't ignore the genuine interest in her voice. "She's good. Still talking about the play. Still asking about you." "Really?" Something flickered in Lauren's eyes. "What does she ask?" "When you're coming back, whether you'll braid her hair again, whether you have a favorite dinosaur." Daniel smiled slightly. "She's convinced you need more friends." "She might be right about that." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something that neither was willing to name. "The pitch is Friday," Lauren said finally. "After that, maybe we can talk. About boundaries. About what comes next." Daniel nodded, his heart beating faster. "I'd like that." "Good." She turned back to her desk, dismissing him with the same cool efficiency she showed everyone else. But just before he reached the door, she spoke again. "Daniel, the presentation. It's good, really good. You should be proud." "I am," he said. "Thank you." He walked out of her office feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a future he couldn't quite see. The Henderson pitch would determine whether he had a career, but what happened after that might determine something even more important. It might determine whether two broken people could learn to be whole again. Thursday night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed running through the presentation in his head, anticipating questions, rehearsing answers, trying to prepare for every possible scenario. The numbers were solid, the strategy was innovative, the execution was polished, but none of that guaranteed success. In business, as in life, sometimes you could do everything right and still lose. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. "Can't sleep either?" Daniel stared at the message for a long moment before responding, "Thinking about tomorrow." Lauren's reply came quickly. "Me too, but not just about the pitch." Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed several responses and deleted them all. Finally, he settled on, "I know what you mean." There was a long pause, then, "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these past 2 weeks have meant something to me, something I didn't expect." Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. She was telling him something important, something that went beyond the professional relationship they were supposed to be maintaining. He typed back, "They've meant something to me too." Another pause. Then, "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is a big day." That was it. No declarations, no promises, no clear statement of what any of this meant. Just two people acknowledging that something had changed between them and that neither of them knew yet what to do about it. Daniel set his phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would walk into a conference room and try to convince a billionaire to trust him with a $40 million campaign. Tomorrow, he would find out if the risk he'd taken was brilliant or catastrophic. Tomorrow, he might lose everything he'd worked for. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of his small apartment, with his daughter sleeping safely down the hall, Daniel Brooks felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt hope. The morning of November 15th arrived with the kind of crisp, golden light that Chicago occasionally produced in autumn, the kind that made the city look like a photograph of itself, all gleaming towers and sharp shadows. Daniel stood at his kitchen window at 5:30 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the buildings across the street in shades of amber and rose, and tried to convince his stomach that the churning sensation was excitement rather than terror. Today was the day. The Henderson pitch. The moment that would either vindicate his risky strategy or confirm every doubt anyone had ever had about him. He'd barely slept, drifting in and out of anxious half-dreams, where he stood in front of a conference room full of people whose faces kept changing. Sometimes Marcus Henderson, sometimes Lauren, sometimes Emma, asking why Daddy had lost his job again. The text exchange with Lauren at 2 a.m. felt like something he might have imagined, except his phone still held the evidence of their conversation. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these past 2 weeks have meant something to me." Daniel read the words again, then set his phone down and went to wake Emma. The morning routine felt different today, charged with significance that his 7-year-old couldn't possibly understand. He braided her hair the way Lauren had shown him, still not perfect, but better than before, and packed her lunch with extra care. When they reached the bus stop, Emma looked up at him with the particular intuition that children sometimes possessed. "You're nervous," she said. It wasn't a question. "A little bit." "Is it about the work thing? The important one?" "Yeah, Peanut. The important one." Emma nodded seriously. "Lauren will help you. She's good at helping." "How do you know that?" "Because she helped me with my hair, and she watched my whole play. And when she looks at you, she looks like she wants to help." Emma shrugged with the casual wisdom of a child who saw the world more clearly than most adults. "Just do your best, Daddy. That's what you always tell me." The bus arrived before Daniel could respond, and Emma climbed aboard with her usual confidence, leaving him standing on the sidewalk with his daughter's words echoing in his head. Just do your best. It was such simple advice, such impossibly simple advice. The Whitmore Media Building felt different when Daniel walked through the revolving doors that morning. The lobby seemed brighter, the elevator ride smoother, the hallways less like corridors of corporate anxiety and more like pathways to possibility. He knew it was just his perception shifting, his mind trying to find meaning in a day that might change everything, but he let himself feel it anyway. The Henderson meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Daniel had 6 hours to review his materials one final time, calm his nerves, and prepare for the most important presentation of his career. He found a quiet corner in the 32nd floor conference room that had been reserved for final prep, spread his notes across the table, and began to run through the presentation for what felt like the 100th time. The slides were polished, the talking points memorized, the data triple-checked. But there was always room for doubt, always another angle to consider, always the possibility that he'd missed something crucial. At 10 a.m., the door opened and Lauren walked in. She was wearing what Daniel had come to think of as her armor, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her hair perfectly styled, her expression composed and unreadable. But when their eyes met, something flickered beneath the professional surface. An acknowledgement. A connection that they both understood couldn't be spoken aloud in this building. "How are you feeling?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Terrified. Prepared. Some combination of both." Lauren nodded, moving to stand across the table from him. "That's normal. That's actually good. Fear keeps you sharp." "Is that how you handle big moments? You let yourself be afraid?" "I used to pretend I wasn't. I'd tell myself that fear was weakness, that showing any vulnerability was a liability." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "But I've learned that pretending doesn't actually eliminate the fear. It just makes you brittle. And brittle things break." Daniel studied her, this woman who had built an empire by being harder than everyone around her, now standing in a conference room admitting that her approach might have been wrong. "What changed your mind?" Lauren was quiet for a long moment. "Losing my daughter. Realizing that I'd sacrificed the things that actually mattered for the things I thought I was supposed to want." She looked at him directly, and her eyes held something raw. "Watching you with Emma, seeing what it looks like when someone gets their priorities right." "I don't always get them right," Daniel said. "I work too much. I miss things. I let her down more often than I'd like to admit." "But you're trying. You're actually trying. Do you know how rare that is?" Before Daniel could respond, the door opened again and Marcus Chen stuck his head in. "Whitmore, the Henderson team just arrived. They're setting up in conference room A." Lauren's expression shifted instantly, the vulnerability disappearing behind the professional mask. "Tell them we'll be ready in 20 minutes." Marcus nodded and disappeared. Lauren turned back to Daniel, and when she spoke, her voice was pure CEO. "This is it. Everything you've worked for over the past 2 weeks comes down to the next few hours. Henderson is skeptical, his team is looking for reasons to go with a safer choice, and you're going to have to be exceptional to change their minds." She paused. "But I believe you can do it. I wouldn't have given you this chance if I didn't." "Thank you," Daniel said, "for believing in me, for giving me another shot. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we've won." She turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving Daniel alone with his notes and his fear and the knowledge that everything was about to change. The Henderson team had taken over conference room A like an occupying army. Marcus Henderson himself sat at the head of the table, a man in his late 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that had built a manufacturing empire from nothing. Flanking him were three executives who radiated the particular skepticism of people paid to find flaws in other people's ideas. Daniel stood at the front of the room, his presentation queued up on the screen behind him, his heart hammering against his ribs. Lauren sat in the corner, her presence a reminder of everything that was at stake. "Mr. Brooks," Henderson said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. "My team tells me you have an unconventional approach to our campaign. I have to admit, after our last meeting, I'm surprised you're the one presenting today." The words were a challenge designed to throw him off balance. Daniel had expected this. "Mr. Henderson, I owe you an apology for the errors in my previous presentation. That was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility." He paused, letting the acknowledgement land. "But today, I'm not here to offer you excuses. I'm here to offer you a solution." Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Go on." Daniel clicked to the first slide. "Your company is facing a public relations challenge. The labor disputes at your manufacturing facilities have generated negative media coverage, consumer skepticism, and pressure from shareholders. Every agency pitching for this campaign will offer you the same thing, a glossy brand refresh designed to distract from the problem." One of Henderson's executives shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Brooks, we're not here to discuss our internal—" "Let him speak." Henderson's voice was sharp, his eyes fixed on Daniel. "Continue." "I'm not going to offer you a distraction, Mr. Henderson. I'm going to offer you a transformation." Daniel clicked to the next slide, a detailed analysis of workplace reform initiatives that had successfully rehabilitated corporate reputations. What if instead of hiding from the labor concerns, you led with them? What if Henderson Industries became the face of corporate accountability, not because you were forced to, but because you chose to? The room went silent. Daniel could feel the skepticism radiating from Henderson's team, the tension building like pressure before a storm. But Henderson himself was listening, his expression unreadable. "The campaign I'm proposing would position your company as a pioneer in workplace reform," Daniel continued. "We'd partner with labor advocacy groups, launch a transparency initiative that gives consumers real-time access to working conditions data, and create a marketing narrative around the idea that Henderson Industries doesn't just make products, you make a difference in people's lives." "That's a significant risk," one of the executives said. "You're asking us to admit we have a problem." "You already have a problem. Everyone knows it. The question is whether you address it proactively or wait until you're forced to." Daniel looked directly at Henderson. "The companies that survive in this market aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who own their mistakes and turn them into opportunities." Henderson was quiet for a long moment. The silence stretched until Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. "You're asking me to bet my company's reputation on a strategy that no other agency has proposed," Henderson said finally. "Yes, sir. Because the safe strategies won't work. Your competitors will outspend you on traditional campaigns. Your critics will keep finding ammunition to use against you. The only way to win is to change the game entirely." Henderson studied him with an intensity that felt almost physical. "You know what I see when I look at you, Mr. Brooks." Daniel's stomach tightened. "No, sir. I see a man who's taking a risk, a big one. You could have walked in here with a safe presentation, something polished and predictable that would have kept your job secure even if we didn't sign." Henderson leaned forward. "Instead, you're standing here telling me that my company has problems and that I need to fix them. Either you're very brave or very stupid." "Maybe a little of both, sir." For the first time, something like a smile flickered across Henderson's face. "I built my company by taking risks that other people thought were crazy. Did you know that?" "I did, actually. It's one of the reasons I thought this approach might appeal to you." "You did your homework." Henderson glanced at his team, then back at Daniel. "I want to see the implementation plan, the timeline, the budget, the specific partnerships you're proposing. I want to understand exactly what we'd be committing to." Daniel's heart leaped. This wasn't a yes, not yet, but it wasn't a no either. It was interest, genuine interest. "Of course, sir, I have detailed projections for—" "Not now. I've seen enough for today." Henderson stood, and his team immediately followed suit. I'll be in touch with Miss Whitmore by Monday. This is an interesting proposal, Mr. Brooks. Very interesting indeed. He walked out without another word, his team trailing behind him. The conference room fell silent. Daniel stood frozen at the front of the room, his presentation still glowing on the screen behind him, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Had he succeeded? Failed? Something in between? Daniel, he turned to find Lauren standing beside him, her expression complex, relief and admiration and something else he couldn't quite name. That was extraordinary, she said softly. Was it? I can't tell. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no either, and Marcus Henderson always says no to things he doesn't like. The fact that he wants to see more. Lauren shook her head slowly. You did something I've never seen anyone do in 15 years of working with him. You surprised him. You made him think. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I should have included more financial projections in the main presentation, he said. I had them ready, but I wanted to focus on the narrative first. Stop. Lauren's hand touched his arm just briefly. You did everything right. Now we wait. Waiting, as it turned out, was the hardest part. The weekend crawled by in a haze of anxiety and distraction. Daniel tried to focus on Emma, taking her to the park, helping with homework, making pancakes for breakfast the way she liked them. But part of his mind was always elsewhere, running through the presentation, second-guessing his choices, imagining all the ways the call could go wrong. Emma noticed, of course. She always noticed. Daddy, you're doing that thing again, she said on Saturday afternoon, looking up from the puzzle they were working on together. What thing? The thing where your face is here, but your brain is somewhere else. Daniel smiled despite himself. Sorry, Peanut. I'm just thinking about work. The important meeting? Did it go bad? It went. I'm not sure how it went, actually. We'll find out on Monday. Emma considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old contemplating the mysteries of the universe. Lauren will know, she said finally. She knows about work things. You should call her. I can't just call her, Emma. She's my boss. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? You like her. She likes you. You should talk. How do you know she likes me? Emma gave him the look she reserved for questions she considered obviously stupid. Because she came to my play, Daddy, and she learned how to braid my hair. And when she looks at you, she gets the same face you get when you look at me. Daniel stared at his daughter, struck silent by the casual precision of her observation. What face is that? He managed. The happy, worried face, like something makes you really happy, but you're also scared it might go away. Emma returned to her puzzle, apparently done with the conversation. You should call her. Daniel didn't call Lauren, but he did check his phone approximately every 15 minutes for the rest of the weekend, and by Sunday night he'd composed and deleted at least a dozen text messages that ranged from professional inquiry to something that veered dangerously close to confession. Monday morning arrived with the particular cruelty of a day that held too much significance. Daniel dropped Emma at the bus stop, rode the L to downtown, walked through the revolving doors of the Whitmore Media Building, and tried to convince himself that whatever happened, he would be okay. The call came at 11:47 a.m. Daniel was at his desk, pretending to review quarterly reports while actually staring at his phone, when Lauren's assistant appeared at his cubicle. Ms. Whitmore would like to see you, Jeremy said. Immediately. The walk to Lauren's office felt longer than it ever had before. Every step seemed to echo in the silence of the hallway. Every heartbeat a drum roll, leading to a verdict he couldn't predict. Lauren was standing at the window when he entered, her back to the door. For a long moment, she didn't move or speak, and Daniel felt his stomach drop. This was it. The silence said everything. Henderson had chosen another agency, the risky strategy had failed, and now he was going to have to figure out how to explain to Emma why Daddy was looking for a new job. Then Lauren turned around, and she was smiling. Not the professional smile she used in meetings, not the polished expression she deployed for investors and clients. A real smile, wide and unguarded, transforming her face into something almost girlish. He said yes. Daniel blinked. What? Henderson. He called me 20 minutes ago. He's signing with us. The full campaign, exactly as you proposed. Lauren's voice was shaking slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was saying. Daniel, he said it was the most innovative pitch he'd received in 20 years. He said you reminded him of himself when he was starting out. The words took a moment to penetrate the fog of anticipation and dread that had surrounded Daniel for 3 days. Then, all at once, they hit him. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. We won? The question came out as barely a whisper. We won. Lauren crossed the room toward him, her composure crumbling further with every step. You won. This was your vision, your risk, your execution. I just gave you the opportunity. You made it happen. Daniel's legs felt suddenly unreliable. He reached for the back of the chair to steady himself, his mind racing to catch up with reality. I thought, when you didn't say anything right away, I thought I was trying to be professional. Lauren stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the tears gathering in her eyes. I was trying to be the CEO who gives employees good news with appropriate corporate distance, but I can't. I don't want to be that person right now. What do you want to be? The question hung between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said over the past weeks. All the boundaries they'd been maintaining, all the careful distance, all the pretense that what was building between them was just professional respect. I want to be someone who's allowed to tell you that I'm proud of you, Lauren said, her voice rough. I want to be someone who can say that watching you in that conference room on Friday was the most impressed I've been with anyone in years. I want to be someone who doesn't have to pretend that this, she gestured vaguely between them, is only about work. Daniel's breath caught. Lauren, I know it's complicated. I know there are power dynamics and professional boundaries and 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. She shook her head slowly. But I've spent my whole life doing the sensible thing, the expected thing, the thing that looks good on paper. And where did it get me? An empty apartment and a daughter who won't speak to me, and a company that I built by sacrificing everything else. You're not that person anymore, Daniel said. I've seen it. The way you were with Emma, the way you've been with me. That's not someone who sacrifices everything. That's someone who's learning to be different. Learning? Lauren laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. At 45, I'm learning to be a human being. Isn't that pathetic? It's not pathetic. It's brave. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the hesitance of something new and fragile. Lauren, I've been thinking about you constantly, not as my boss, not as the CEO of this company, as you. The woman who cried while braiding my daughter's hair, the woman who ate grilled cheese at a diner and laughed at dinosaur jokes, the woman who texted me at 2 a.m. because she couldn't sleep either. I told myself that was just checking on the presentation, Lauren admitted. Was it? No, it was an excuse to talk to you because talking to you makes me feel... She trailed off, searching for words. Makes you feel what? Less alone, her voice cracked on the words. For the first time in years, talking to you makes me feel less alone. They stood there in the glass-walled office, hands intertwined, the city sprawling beneath them like a promise of something vast and possible. Two people who'd spent their lives building walls, Daniel around his heart after Sarah left, Lauren around her humanity as she built her empire, now standing in the rubble of those walls, exposed and uncertain and more alive than either had felt in years. So what do we do now? Daniel asked. I don't know. Lauren looked at their joined hands, then back at his face. But I think we figure it out together. The news of the Henderson account spread through the office like wildfire. By early afternoon, Daniel had been congratulated by colleagues he barely knew, invited to after-work drinks by people who'd been avoiding him since his disastrous first presentation, and stopped in the hallway by Marcus Chen, who clapped him on the back and said, "You son of a gun! I didn't think you had it in you." It was strange being the center of positive attention after weeks of feeling like a failure waiting to be officially declared. Daniel accepted the congratulations with appropriate modesty, deflected credit toward the team, and spent most of the day trying to process the reality of his changed circumstances. But beneath the professional triumph, something else was shifting, something that had nothing to do with accounts won or careers saved. That evening, Daniel picked up Emma from Mrs. Patterson's house and took her to Lucky's Diner for a celebration dinner. They sat in the same booth where they'd sat with Lauren 2 weeks ago, and Emma chattered about her day while Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half replaying his conversation with Lauren over and over, less alone. She'd said he made her feel less alone. And the truth was, she made him feel the same way. "Daddy, you're doing the happy worried face again." Daniel blinked, returning to the present. Emma was watching him with her particular expression of childlike concern. "Sorry, Peanut. I was just thinking. About Lauren? About a lot of things. But mostly Lauren." It wasn't a question. Daniel smiled despite himself. "Yeah, mostly Lauren." Emma nodded as if this confirmed something she'd already known. "You should tell her you like her, Daddy. Life is short. That's what Mrs. Patterson says. Life is short, and you should tell people you like them before it's too late." Mrs. Patterson is very wise. "I know. She also makes really good cookies." Emma attacked her grilled cheese with the singular focus of a hungry 7-year-old. "When is Lauren coming over again?" "I don't know, Peanut. It's complicated." "You always say that. Why is it complicated?" Daniel considered the question. How did you explain to a 7-year-old the complexities of office politics, power dynamics, and the terrifying prospect of opening yourself up to someone new after years of carefully constructed self-sufficiency? "Because when adults like each other," he said slowly, "there are a lot of rules about how things are supposed to work. And sometimes those rules make it hard to just be together." Emma frowned. "That's dumb. Rules about liking people are dumb." "Sometimes they are, yes. So break the rules." Emma said it with the casual certainty of someone for whom complexity hadn't yet become a barrier. "You always tell me that rules are important, but you also tell me that some rules are wrong and you have to decide which ones to follow. So decide, Daddy." Daniel stared at his daughter, once again struck by the precision of her 7-year-old wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" he asked. "I've always been smart. You're just noticing now." They finished dinner and walked home through the autumn evening, Emma's hand in his, her voice carrying on about school and friends, and whether she could get a dog for Christmas. Daniel listened and nodded and made appropriate sounds of engagement, but part of him was somewhere else entirely. Decide. Such a simple instruction, such an impossibly complicated act. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on his couch with his phone in his hand, staring at Lauren's contact information. The cursor blinked in the text field, waiting for words he couldn't quite find. Finally, he typed, "Emma thinks we should break the rules." The response came almost immediately. "What rules?" "All of them. The ones that say this is complicated. The ones that say we should be professional. The ones that say two broken people can't help each other heal." There was a long pause. Daniel watched the typing indicator appear and disappear several times. Then, "Your daughter is very wise. She gets it from me." Debatable. Despite everything, despite the uncertainty and the fear and the overwhelming weight of what they were contemplating, Daniel found himself laughing. "What do you want, Lauren? Not what makes sense, not what's appropriate. What do you actually want?" Another pause, longer this time. "I want to see you, not at the office, not with pretense, just you and me, and maybe Emma if she's willing. I want to learn how to be someone who doesn't sacrifice everything. I want to stop being alone." Daniel read the words 3 times, his heart pounding. "Tomorrow night," he typed. "Come over for dinner. Emma will make you try her famous spaghetti art. She arranges the noodles into pictures before she eats them. It's a whole process." The response came quickly. "I'd like that. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." Daniel set down his phone and stared at the ceiling of his small apartment, this cramped space that held everything he'd built and everything he hoped to become. Tomorrow, Lauren Whitmore would walk through his door, not as his CEO, not as the woman who controlled his career, but as someone who was trying to learn how to be human again. It was terrifying. It was exactly right. And for the first time since Sarah had left, Daniel Brooks allowed himself to imagine a future that included someone other than himself and his daughter. A future with laughter and partnership and the terrifying, wonderful possibility of love. The next evening, Lauren arrived at precisely 6:30 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and looking more nervous than Daniel had ever seen her. She'd exchanged her corporate armor for something softer, jeans and a cashmere sweater in a shade of blue that made her eyes look almost luminous. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves that made her look younger and more approachable than the polished CEO who commanded boardrooms. Emma opened the door before Daniel could get there, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Lauren, you came! Daddy said you were coming, but sometimes he says things and then they don't happen, so I wasn't sure, but you're here, and I already started making the spaghetti art, and I'm going to make a dinosaur because dinosaurs are the best." Lauren smiled, that real smile that transformed her face, and crouched down to Emma's level. "A dinosaur sounds perfect. Can I help?" "Yes, but you have to wash your hands first. That's the rule. Daddy says germs are invisible enemies, and we have to defeat them with soap." "Soap is a weapon against invisible enemies," Lauren said, glancing up at Daniel with amusement. "Your father is very wise." Daniel shrugged. "I take my wisdom where I can find it." The evening unfolded with an ease that surprised all of them. Lauren helped Emma arrange spaghetti noodles into increasingly elaborate designs, while Daniel finished the sauce and tried not to stare at the two of them like a man witnessing a miracle. They ate dinner at the small kitchen table, trading stories and laughter, and when Emma demanded that Lauren rate her dinosaur on a scale of 1 to 10, Lauren gave it a 7.5, because the tail is excellent, but the arms need work, which is historically accurate for a T-Rex anyway. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Lauren her room. The glow-in-the-dark stars, the stuffed animals with names and backstories, the drawings taped to every available surface. Lauren admired each item with genuine interest, asking questions and making comments that proved she was actually listening rather than just going through the motions. Watching them together, Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. This was what family was supposed to look like. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Connected. Alive. At 8 o'clock, Emma reluctantly agreed to start getting ready for bed. Lauren said goodnight at her door, receiving a fierce hug that seemed to surprise them both. "Will you come back?" Emma asked, still holding on. "If your father invites me." Emma looked at Daniel with an expression that clearly communicated he'd better invite her. "He will," she said confidently. "He likes you, and you make him happy. And happy daddy is the best daddy." "Emma," Daniel started, embarrassed. "It's okay, Peanut," Lauren said, using the nickname Daniel had never heard anyone else use. "I like your daddy too, and you both make me happy." Emma beamed. "Then it's settled. You'll come back. Good night, Lauren. Good night, Daddy." She closed her door with the particular authority of a 7-year-old who'd accomplished what she set out to do. Daniel and Lauren stood in the narrow hallway, suddenly aware that they were alone for the first time all evening. The apartment felt different with Emma behind her closed door. Smaller, somehow. More intimate. "Wine?" Daniel offered. "Please." They moved to the living room, settling on opposite ends of the small couch. Daniel poured 2 glasses and handed one to Lauren, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent a jolt through him that seemed disproportionate to such a small touch. "Thank you," Lauren said, "for tonight, for letting me into this." She gestured vaguely at the apartment, at Emma's room, at everything this small space represented. "Thank you for coming, for wanting to be here." "I didn't just want to be here." Lauren took a sip of wine, her eyes meeting his over the rim of the glass. "I needed to be here. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the city filtering through the windows like a distant melody. "Can I tell you something?" Lauren asked. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Of course." She set down her wine glass and turned to face him fully. "After my divorce, after Rachel stopped speaking to me, I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need connection, didn't need family, didn't need any of the things that other people seem to want so desperately. I had my company, I had success. That was supposed to be enough. But it wasn't. No." Her voice cracked slightly. "It wasn't. I've been so lonely, Daniel, for years, so lonely that I forgot what it felt like to not be lonely. And then that night in my office, when I asked you to take me home and you thought—" She shook her head. "The look on your face, the fear, it made me realize how far I'd fallen, how disconnected I'd become from basic human interaction. That wasn't your fault. The way I reacted? It was my fault. Not the misunderstanding itself, but the circumstances that led to it. I'd built a world where people expected the worst from me, where a request for help could be interpreted as a threat. Lauren's eyes glistened. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I want to be with you. Daniel reached out and took her hand. A deliberate choice. A declaration. Then don't be. Start over. Start here, with me and Emma, in this ridiculously small apartment with the water stain on the ceiling and the heating that doesn't work properly. Lauren laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Your heating is terrible. I know. I've been complaining to the landlord for 2 years. And the water stain looks like Abraham Lincoln. Emma thinks it looks like a dinosaur. Of course she does. Lauren squeezed his hand, her smile wobbly but real. Daniel, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be in a relationship that isn't about power or strategy or positioning. I don't know how to be vulnerable without feeling like I'm losing. Neither do I, Daniel admitted. After Sarah left, I convinced myself that I was better off alone, that Emma was all I needed, that opening myself up to someone else was just inviting pain. He paused. But these past few weeks, being around you, watching you try to change, it made me realize that I don't want to be alone anymore, even if it's scary, even if it might not work. What if we mess this up? What if we hurt each other? Then we deal with it. We talk. We figure it out. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. But we don't run. We don't hide. We stay and we try. Lauren looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression, the last of her walls crumbling, the armor she'd worn for decades finally falling away. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Okay, I'll stay. I'll try. Stay. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that you'll tell me when I'm being too controlling or too closed off or too CEO. Promise me you won't let me retreat into old patterns just because they're comfortable. I promise. As long as you promise to tell me when I'm being too stubborn or too afraid or too convinced that I have to do everything myself. Deal. They sealed the promise with a kiss, tentative at first, then deeper, two people who'd been drowning finally finding air. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic music or any of the things that movies promised. It was better. It was real. It was two broken people choosing to break differently, together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing slightly harder than before, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. So what happens now? He asked. Now? Lauren smiled. Now we figure out how to be a family. You, me, and the wisest 7-year-old in Chicago. She's going to be insufferable when she finds out she was right about us. She was right about everything. We should probably just accept that she's smarter than both of us combined. Daniel laughed, pulling her closer. Probably. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm, cars and trains and millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns no one could predict. But inside this small apartment, something new was beginning, something fragile and terrifying and full of possibility. They talked until midnight, sharing histories and fears and dreams that neither had spoken aloud in years. Lauren told him about her childhood, her first marriage, the slow unraveling of her relationship with Rachel. Daniel told her about Sarah, about the early days of single fatherhood, about the constant guilt of feeling like he was never enough. When Lauren finally left, with plans to return on Saturday for another dinner, and Sunday for a trip to the zoo that Emma had been campaigning for, Daniel stood at his window and watched her car disappear around the corner. Then he walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep. She was clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a well-worn elephant named Professor Trunk, and her face was peaceful in a way that made Daniel's heart ache with love. You were right, Peanut, he whispered, about everything. Emma didn't stir, but Professor Trunk seemed to nod in agreement. Daniel smiled and went to bed, falling asleep faster than he had in months, his dreams full of laughter and spaghetti dinosaurs and the revolutionary possibility of not being alone anymore. The weeks that followed moved with the particular rhythm of new beginnings, tentative at first, then increasingly confident, like a melody finding its groove. Lauren became a regular presence in Daniel's small apartment, arriving after work with her corporate armor gradually softening into something more comfortable. Emma greeted each visit with the enthusiasm of a child who'd decided that the universe was finally arranging itself properly, and Daniel found himself looking forward to the evenings with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. They established routines without meaning to. Tuesday dinners became a standing arrangement, with Lauren learning to cook simple meals under Emma's exacting supervision. Saturday mornings brought trips to the park or the museum or wherever Emma's imagination dictated, the three of them navigating the city like explorers discovering new territory. Sunday afternoons were for homework and quiet conversation, and the kind of domestic peace that Daniel had convinced himself he'd never have again. But the office remained complicated. They'd agreed to keep their relationship private, at least until they understood what it was becoming. The power dynamics were impossible to ignore. Lauren was still the CEO, Daniel still a mid-level account manager, and the optics of their connection could destroy both their reputations if handled poorly. So they maintained their professional distance during work hours, communicating through the same formal channels as everyone else, treating each other with the same courteous detachment that characterized all of Lauren's interactions with employees. It was exhausting. It was necessary. It was slowly driving Daniel insane. "She walked right past me today," he told Mrs. Patterson one evening while picking up Emma. "We were in the elevator together for 11 floors, and she didn't even look at me." Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow with the particular skepticism of a woman who'd seen too much of life to be impressed by romantic complications. "And what did you expect her to do? Kiss you in front of the accounting department?" "No, but Daniel." Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. "You're building something real. That takes time and patience and the wisdom to know when to push and when to wait. You've never been good at waiting." "I'm good at waiting," Daniel protested. "You check your phone every 30 seconds when she's supposed to text you. I've seen you." He couldn't argue with that. The Henderson campaign was progressing beautifully, which helped distract him from the cognitive dissonance of his dual life. The Workplace Reform Initiative had launched a positive press coverage, and early consumer research showed significant improvement in brand perception. Marcus Henderson himself had called Daniel twice to express his satisfaction, calls that had been transferred to Lauren's office, where Daniel sat across from her desk pretending they hadn't spent the previous evening watching Disney movies with his daughter. "Henderson wants to expand the campaign," Lauren said during one of these calls, her voice carrying through the speakerphone with professional crispness. "He's talking about a second phase focused on community partnerships." "That aligns with the original vision," Daniel replied, equally professional. "I can have a proposal ready by next week. Make it Thursday. I want to review it before the board meeting." "Of course, Ms. Whitmore." The formality felt absurd, but necessary. They'd established these boundaries for good reasons. Still, when the call ended and Lauren hung up, Daniel caught the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the suppressed smile of someone who found their circumstances both ridiculous and oddly exciting. "Ms. Whitmore," she repeated, shaking her head. "You know I hate when you call me that. Would you prefer ma'am?" "I would prefer you come over tonight and help me understand why Emma thinks I need to learn the names of every dinosaur in existence." "She's testing you. It's her way of deciding if you're worthy of being part of our family." The word hung in the air between them, family, carrying weight that neither had fully examined. Lauren's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering beneath the professional surface. "Am I passing?" she asked quietly. "You're acing it. She's already decided you're her favorite adult who isn't me." That's a very specific category. Emma is very specific about her categories. They shared a look that said everything they couldn't say aloud in this building, and then Daniel gathered his materials and returned to his desk, counting the hours until he could be himself again. December arrived with the first real cold of winter, the kind that turned breath to fog, and made the walk from the L station feel like an Arctic expedition. Emma had started rehearsals for the school Christmas pageant. She'd been cast as an angel this time, a promotion from Tree that she took very seriously, and Lauren had volunteered to help with costume creation, a task that had revealed a surprising talent for sewing that she claimed to have learned from her grandmother decades ago. "I didn't know you could sew," Daniel said one evening, watching her attach wings to a white dress while Emma supervised from the couch. "There's a lot you don't know about me." Lauren's focus remained on her stitching. "I used to make Rachel's Halloween costumes, every year until she was 12. Then she decided she was too old for homemade costumes and wanted store-bought ones instead." The mention of Rachel landed with the particular weight it always carried. Lauren rarely spoke about her estranged daughter, and when she did, the pain in her voice was impossible to miss. "Have you thought about reaching out to her?" Daniel asked carefully. "Every day." Lauren's hand stilled on the fabric. "Every single day. But she made it very clear the last time we spoke that she didn't want to hear from me, that I'd lost the right to be her mother when I chose work over her. That was years ago. People change." "Do they?" Lauren looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've changed, yes. But how do I prove that to someone who won't give me the chance? How do I show her that I'm not the same person who missed her childhood because I was too busy building an empire?" Emma, who had been pretending to read a book while clearly eavesdropping, set down her story and walked over to where Lauren sat. "Maybe you should write her a letter," Emma said, with the casual wisdom that had become her trademark. "My teacher says that when you can't talk to someone, you should write down what you want to say. Then you can decide if you want to send it or not." Lauren looked at the 7-year-old with an expression of wonder. "That's very good advice, Emma." "I know, I'm very good at advice." Emma climbed onto the couch beside Lauren and examined the angel wings with a critical eye. "These are beautiful. Rachel should see them. Maybe you could send her a picture." "I don't think—" "Not to make her feel bad," Emma clarified. "Just to show her that you're doing nice things now. That you're being a good friend to me and Daddy. Maybe if she sees that you're different, she'll want to know you again." Lauren was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was rough. "You really think that could work?" "I don't know, but you won't know either unless you try." Emma shrugged with the particular nonchalance of someone who hadn't yet learned to be paralyzed by fear of rejection. "That's what Daddy always says. You have to try, even when it's scary." Daniel watched the exchange with his heart in his throat. His daughter, this small person he'd raised through exhaustion and terror and overwhelming love, was teaching a billionaire CEO how to be brave. "She's right," he said softly. "You'll never know unless you try." Lauren looked at him, then at Emma, then at the angel wings in her hands. Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made, a wall coming down. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll write her a letter." The letter took 3 weeks to write. Daniel watched Lauren struggle with it, drafting and revising and throwing away countless attempts that never seemed to capture what she wanted to say. The process was agonizing, not just for Lauren but for him, watching someone he cared about grapple with regrets that couldn't be undone. "It's not good enough," Lauren said one evening, crumpling yet another draft. "Everything I write sounds like an excuse, or an apology, or both." "Maybe that's okay," Daniel suggested. "Maybe that's what she needs to hear." "She needs to hear that I'm sorry?" "She knows I'm sorry. Everyone knows I'm sorry. But being sorry doesn't fix anything. Being sorry doesn't give her back the childhood I stole from her." "You didn't steal—" "I did." Lauren's voice was sharp with self-recrimination. "Every recital I missed, every birthday I delegated to assistants, every conversation cut short because of a call I had to take, those were choices I made. I chose the company over my daughter, and she has every right to hate me for it." Daniel moved to sit beside her on the couch, taking the crumpled letter from her hands. "Then maybe don't apologize. Maybe don't make excuses. Maybe just tell her the truth." "What truth?" "That you're different now. That you've met someone who's shown you what family can look like. That you're learning to be present, to show up, to put people before profits." He smoothed out the crumpled paper. "Tell her about Emma. Tell her about us. Show her who you're becoming instead of apologizing for who you were." Lauren stared at him for a long moment. "That's terrifying." "I know." "What if she reads it and still doesn't want to know me?" "Then at least you'll know you tried, and you'll have us." Daniel reached for her hand. "You'll always have us." The final letter went out 3 days before Christmas.
Lauren didn't tell Daniel what she'd written, and he didn't ask.
Some things needed to remain private, even between people who were building a life together. Christmas Eve arrived with a light snow that dusted the city in white, making even the grittiest neighborhoods look like postcards. Daniel had invited Lauren to spend the holiday with them, her first Christmas away from the empty penthouse she'd been rattling around in for years. And she'd accepted with an eagerness that revealed how much she'd been dreading another holiday alone. Emma had made decorations by hand, paper chains and construction paper ornaments and a star for the top of their small tree that was more glitter than structure. The apartment looked like a craft store had exploded, and Daniel had never loved it more. "It's perfect," Lauren said when she arrived, taking in the chaotic decorations with genuine wonder. "This is exactly what Christmas should look like." "It's messy," Daniel admitted. "It's alive, there's a difference." They spent the evening in the particular warmth of a holiday spent with people who mattered. Emma insisted on reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" aloud, with Lauren playing the role of all the reindeer while Daniel provided sound effects. They ate cookies and drank hot chocolate and watched the snow fall outside the window. And when Emma finally fell asleep on the couch, Daniel carried her to bed while Lauren stood in the doorway, watching. "I never had this," she said quietly when Daniel emerged from Emma's room. "Christmas was always formal when I was growing up. Expensive presents, catered meals, everyone dressed in their best clothes. Then when Rachel was young, I tried to recreate that. The perfect Christmas. Everything coordinated and controlled. I think I was so focused on making it look right that I forgot to make it feel right." What did it feel like? Empty. Even when the room was full of people, it felt empty. Lauren's eyes glistened in the soft light. "This doesn't feel empty at all." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close while the snow continued to fall. "You're not empty anymore. Neither am I. I love you." The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for weeks. "I know it's too soon. I know we agreed to take things slow, but I love you, Daniel. You and Emma. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Daniel's heart clenched. He'd known this was coming, had felt it building in every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every moment of domestic peace. But hearing the words spoken aloud made them real in a way that was both terrifying and wonderful. "I love you too," he said. "Both of us do." They kissed beneath the paper chains and construction paper ornaments, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. And when Lauren pulled back, her eyes shining with tears and joy, and the particular vulnerability of someone who'd finally stopped being afraid, Daniel knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Christmas morning brought presents and pancakes and Emma's shrieking delight at the new art supplies she'd been asking for. Lauren watched the chaos with the expression of someone witnessing something sacred, and when Emma insisted that Lauren open her gift, a handmade card with a drawing of three people holding hands beneath a rainbow, the CEO of Whitmore Media Group cried openly for the first time in years. "This is the best present I've ever received," she said, her voice breaking. "It's just a card," Emma said, suddenly shy. "It's not just a card, it's a family." Lauren held out her arms, and Emma launched herself into them with the particular abandon of a child who'd decided someone was hers. "Thank you, Emma, for everything." "You're welcome. Now can we have more pancakes?" The holiday passed in a blur of warmth and laughter, and by the time New Year's Eve arrived, Daniel had accepted that his life had fundamentally changed. He was no longer the exhausted single father barely holding things together. He was part of something larger, a family being built from scratch, imperfect and complicated and more precious than anything he'd ever imagined. But complications, as they always did, found a way to intrude. The first sign of trouble came the second week of January, when Daniel noticed a shift in the office atmosphere. Conversation stopped when he approached. Colleagues who'd been friendly since the Henderson success suddenly seemed distant. Marcus Chen pulled him aside after a meeting and said, in a low voice, "You might want to watch your back, Danny. People are talking." "Talking about what?" "About you. About Whitmore. About why a mid-level account manager is suddenly getting the best assignments and the most face time with the CEO." Marcus's expression was sympathetic but serious. "I'm not saying anything happened. I'm just saying that perception matters in this business, and the perception right now isn't great." Daniel felt his stomach drop. Nothing inappropriate has happened. The Henderson account was earned on merit. I believe you, but not everyone does, and some people are starting to ask questions. The questions, it turned out, were being asked by Victoria Marsh, a senior vice president who'd been passed over for the Henderson assignment, and had apparently decided that Daniel's success must be attributable to something other than talent. She'd started making comments in meetings, subtle digs about favoritism and special treatment. She'd begun documenting Daniel's interactions with Lauren, tracking how often they were in meetings together, how frequently Lauren praised his work. It was, Daniel realized with growing horror, the beginning of a campaign to destroy him. "She's building a case," Lauren said when Daniel told her about it. They were in her apartment, his first visit to the Lakeshore Drive penthouse, and the luxury of the space felt oppressive rather than impressive. "Victoria has wanted my job for years. If she can prove that I'm giving you preferential treatment because of a personal relationship, it creates a scandal that could force the board to remove me. Then we stop seeing each other until this blows over." "No," Lauren's voice was fierce. "I'm not losing you because of office politics. What's the alternative? We go public? Announce to the entire company that we're together?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." Daniel stared at her. "Lauren, that's career suicide for both of us. It's the only option that doesn't involve lying or hiding." Lauren stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city she'd conquered. "I've spent my entire career protecting my reputation, managing perceptions, making sure no one could ever question my competence or my judgment. And where did it get me? A corner office and a daughter who won't speak to me. This is different. It's not different. It's the same choice in a different form. Prioritize the company over the people I love, or finally choose differently." She turned to face him. "I choose differently. I choose you. I choose Emma. I choose being honest about who I am and what I want, even if it costs me everything I've built. You can't throw away your company because of me. It's not because of you, it's because of me. Because I refuse to spend another decade hiding and pretending and sacrificing the things that matter." Lauren's eyes were bright with determination. "I'll call a board meeting. I'll disclose the relationship. I'll let them decide if it's a problem. And if they decide it is, then I'll step down." The words landed like a bomb. Daniel couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Lauren, you built this company from nothing. You can't just—" "I can. I built it, which means I can walk away from it. And if the choice is between Whitmore Media and you and Emma, it's not even a choice." She crossed the room and took his hands in hers. "Daniel, I'm 45 years old. I've spent 20 years building something that looks impressive but feels hollow. You've shown me what it feels like to have something real, something that matters, something that fills the empty spaces I've been carrying around for so long. I'm not giving that up. Not for anyone." Daniel looked at her, this fierce, complicated woman who'd crashed into his life like a force of nature, and felt something shift in his chest. She was willing to sacrifice everything for him, everything she'd worked for, everything she'd achieved, everything that defined her in the eyes of the world.
"I love you," he said, "but I can't let you do this, not alone." "What do you mean?" "I mean we do it together. We walk into that board meeting together. We tell them the truth together. Whatever happens, we face it as partners." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "You'd do that? Risk your career, your reputation? For you? For us?" Daniel pulled her into his arms, in a heartbeat. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Daniel spent the weekend in a state of anxious preparation, rehearsing what he'd say, anticipating questions, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. Lauren did the same, though she approached it with the clinical precision of someone who'd faced hostile boardrooms before. Emma, sensing the tension in the adults around her, asked approximately every hour if everything was okay. "Everything is fine, Peanut," Daniel told her for the 20th time. "Lauren and I just have an important meeting at work." "About us? About you being together? How do you know about that?" Emma rolled her eyes with the particular exasperation of a 7-year-old surrounded by oblivious adults. "I'm not stupid, Daddy. You look at each other the way Sophia's mom and dad look at each other. You're in love." "Yes, we are." "So why is that a problem?" "Because sometimes when adults work together, there are rules about falling in love." "That's dumb. Rules about love are always dumb." Daniel laughed despite himself. You might be right about that. I'm always right. You should listen to me more. Sunday evening, Daniel received a text that changed everything. It was from Lauren, just 3 words. Check your email. He opened his inbox to find a forwarded message, an email sent from Victoria Marsh to the entire board of directors. The subject line read, Evidence of inappropriate relationship between CEO and subordinate. The email contained photographs. Photos of Daniel and Lauren leaving her apartment building. Photos of them holding hands in the park with Emma. Photos of them kissing in his living room window, taken from the street below. Someone had been watching them, documenting them, building a case. Daniel's phone rang. Lauren. Don't come to the meeting tomorrow, she said before he could speak. Her voice was calm, too calm. The voice of someone who'd made a decision. Stay home with Emma. I'll handle this. Lauren, we agreed. The situation has changed. Victoria has escalated faster than I expected. If you walk into that meeting, they'll tear you apart to get to me. She paused. I won't let that happen. I won't let them use you as ammunition. I'm not letting you face this alone. You're not. You're protecting our family. Emma needs you there tomorrow, not sitting in a boardroom while executives dissect our relationship. Lauren, I love you, Daniel. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that. I love you, and I don't regret anything. She hung up before he could respond. Daniel stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone, feeling like the ground had opened beneath his feet. Everything they'd built, everything they'd hoped for, it was all at risk now. And there was nothing he could do but wait. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky and a chill that seemed to seep through the walls of Daniel's apartment. He'd barely slept, tossing and turning while his mind played out scenarios he couldn't control. Emma sensed his distress and stayed quiet through breakfast, eating her cereal with uncharacteristic solemnity. Is Lauren going to be okay? She asked as Daniel walked her to the bus stop. I hope so, Peanut. Will she still come to our house? Will we still be a family? The question broke something in Daniel's heart. I don't know, he admitted. But whatever happens, I'm going to fight for us. I promise. Emma nodded, her small face serious. Then she'll be okay. You're good at fighting for things that matter. The bus arrived, and Daniel watched his daughter climb aboard with the same mixture of love and fear that had defined his life for 7 years. Then he went home, sat on his couch, and waited for news. The text came at 2:47 p.m. It's over. Come to the office. We need to talk. Daniel's heart stopped. It's over. The words could mean anything. The meeting was over. Their relationship was over. Lauren's career was over. He tried to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He grabbed his coat and ran for the L. The Whitmore Media Building felt different when he walked through the doors. Quieter somehow, the usual bustle of activity muted. People avoided his eyes as he crossed the lobby. The security guard, who usually smiled at him, looked away. It's over. Daniel took the elevator to the 32nd floor, his heart pounding against his ribs. The doors opened onto a scene of controlled chaos, assistants hurrying between offices, executives clustered in whispered conversations, the particular energy of a major organizational shift in progress. Lauren's office was empty. She's in conference room A, Jeremy said, appearing at Daniel's elbow. His expression was unreadable. She asked me to send you in when you arrived. Daniel walked to the conference room with the sensation of moving through water, every step weighted and slow. Through the glass walls, he could see Lauren sitting alone at the long table, her back to the door. He opened the door and stepped inside. Lauren turned at the sound, and Daniel felt the breath leave his lungs. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her usually perfect makeup smudged. But when she saw him, something shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like peace. It's over, she said again, and this time he could hear the complexity in the words. Victoria presented her evidence. The board questioned me for 3 hours. They debated for 2 more. She paused. And then they voted. Voted on what? On whether to remove me as CEO. Lauren stood, and Daniel noticed that her hands were shaking. It was close, closer than I expected, but in the end they decided that a consensual relationship between adults, properly disclosed,
wasn't grounds for termination. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. It probably helped that I threatened to take the Henderson account with me if they forced me out. Marcus Henderson called during the meeting to express his support. Daniel's mind struggled to catch up. So you're still CEO? I'm still CEO. With conditions. We have to sign disclosure documents. You're being transferred to a different department, one that doesn't report to me directly. And Victoria Marsh is being investigated for workplace harassment and violation of privacy laws. Victoria is being... The board wasn't happy about the surveillance. Apparently, hiring private investigators to photograph employees' personal lives crosses a line. Lauren's smile widened slightly. It helped our case considerably. Daniel stood frozen, unable to process the reversal of his expectations. He'd walked in prepared for devastation, and instead found something that looked almost like victory. "We won?" he asked, still not quite believing it. "We won." Lauren crossed the room toward him. "Not without cost. The next few months are going to be complicated, and there will always be people who question how I got here. But yes, we won." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while relief flooded through him. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they'd done it. "I thought I lost you," he whispered into her hair. "When you said it was over, I thought, I know, I'm sorry. I should have been clearer." Lauren pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with tears and joy. "I was so afraid, Daniel, so afraid that I'd chosen wrong again, that I'd sacrificed everything for something that wouldn't last. But I couldn't keep hiding. I couldn't keep pretending that you and Emma weren't the most important things in my life." "We are?" "You are. You've been since that night at the diner, when Emma showed me what family could look like." Lauren reached up to touch his face. "I spent 20 years building a company. You spent 7 years building something far more valuable. And now, if you'll let me, I want to help you build it even bigger." Daniel looked at her, this complicated, brilliant, broken woman who'd chosen him, and felt something settle in his chest. The fear that had been his constant companion for years was still there, but it was smaller now, manageable, overshadowed by something larger. Hope. Love. The revolutionary possibility of not being alone anymore. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay, let's build something together." He kissed her forehead. "But first, I need to pick up Emma from school, and you're coming with me." Lauren laughed through her tears. "I'm coming with you? You're coming with us. From now on. To school pickups and grocery stores and parent-teacher conferences and all the boring, beautiful, ordinary moments that make up a life." Daniel took her hand. "You wanted to learn what family feels like? This is it, the chaos and the joy and the everything in between." "I'd like that," Lauren whispered. "I'd like that very much." They walked out of the conference room together, hand in hand, past the whispers and the stares and the knowledge that everything had changed. The company Lauren had built would survive. The career Daniel had nearly lost was secure. And somewhere across the city, a 7-year-old girl was waiting to hear that the family she'd been building in her heart was finally, officially, real. It wasn't the ending Daniel had imagined when he'd walked into Lauren's office all those weeks ago, certain he was about to lose everything. It wasn't the life Lauren had planned when she'd built her empire at the cost of everything else. But it was theirs, imperfect and complicated and more precious than either of them had dared to hope. And they were just getting started. The months that followed the board meeting unfolded like the slow turning of seasons, gradual, inevitable, and somehow transformative in ways that Daniel couldn't have predicted. Spring arrived in Chicago with its usual drama of sudden warmth and unexpected cold snaps, and with it came changes that reshaped every corner of his life. His transfer to the Strategic Partnerships Department had initially felt like exile, a punishment disguised as protocol. But Daniel quickly discovered that the new role suited him better than his old position ever had. Without the pressure of direct competition with colleagues who resented his connection to Lauren, he found space to breathe, to think, to actually enjoy his work for the first time in years. His new supervisor, a pragmatic woman named Helen Chen, who had no patience for office politics, valued results over appearances and gave Daniel the autonomy to pursue projects that actually interested him. The Henderson campaign continued to exceed expectations, its success now attributed to the entire team rather than to Daniel alone, a development that suited everyone. Marcus Henderson had become something of a mentor, calling periodically to discuss business strategy and occasionally to ask about Emma, whom he'd met at a company event and declared the most sensible person at Whitmore Media. But the most significant changes were happening outside the office, in the small apartment that had begun to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. Lauren had started spending more nights there than at her penthouse, a gradual migration that Emma tracked with the precision of a scientist documenting a rare species. Lauren's toothbrush is in our bathroom now, she reported one morning over breakfast, and her coffee cup is in the cabinet, and she has 3 shirts in Daddy's closet. You're very observant, Daniel said. I'm keeping count. Mrs. Patterson says that when someone's stuff moves into your house, it means they're becoming family. Mrs. Patterson is very wise. I know, I keep telling you that. The counting continued through April and May. Lauren's books appearing on the shelf, her favorite blanket draped over the couch, her particular brand of tea taking up residence in the kitchen cabinet. Each edition was small, almost insignificant on its own, but together they painted a picture of a life being woven together, thread by careful thread. Emma's 8th birthday arrived in early June, and Lauren threw herself into the planning with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She consulted with Emma for weeks about themes and decorations, engaged in serious negotiations about the guest list, and personally baked a 3-layer chocolate cake that was slightly lopsided but declared by Emma to be the best cake in the history of cakes. The party was held in the park near Daniel's apartment, a chaotic celebration of children running and screaming and consuming alarming quantities of sugar. Daniel watched Lauren navigate the chaos with growing confidence, helping with games and distributing snacks, and talking to the other parents with an ease that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. She's good at this, Mrs. Patterson observed, standing beside Daniel while Emma opened presents. Being part of things. I wasn't sure she would be at first. People who spend too long alone sometimes forget how to share space with others. She's learning, Daniel said. We all are. You've done well, Daniel, both of you, building something real from something that could have gone very wrong. Mrs. Patterson patted his arm. Emma's mother made a mistake when she left, but I think you've finally found someone who understands what she walked away from. Daniel looked at Lauren, who was currently helping Emma try on a new princess crown while making appropriately impressed faces, and felt his heart swell with something he'd stopped believing in years ago. Hope. Real, unguarded hope. The summer brought heat and long days and the particular laziness that settled over Chicago when the temperature climbed above 90. Lauren reduced her hours at the office, a development that shocked everyone who knew her, and spent afternoons at the pool with Emma, learning to do cannonballs and getting thoroughly beaten at Marco Polo. I was not prepared for how competitive she is at pool games, Lauren admitted one evening, collapsing on the couch with the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by an 8-year-old. She's relentless. She gets it from you, Daniel said. She gets it from you. I've seen you argue with customer service representatives. That's different. They were clearly wrong about the warranty. You argued for 45 minutes. The principal was at stake. Lauren laughed, and Daniel marveled again at how natural this had become. The banter, the shared space, the easy intimacy of two people who'd stopped being careful with each other. The walls they'd both built so carefully had crumbled completely now, leaving something raw and real and more valuable than anything either had possessed before. In August, the letter arrived. Daniel was at work when Lauren called, her voice strange in a way he couldn't immediately identify. I need you to come home, she said. Now, if you can. He made his excuses and caught the first available train, his mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to Emma? Was Lauren sick? Had the board changed their minds about the relationship disclosure? He found Lauren sitting on the couch, holding an envelope with hands that trembled slightly. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling, a complicated smile that held joy and terror and something that looked like grief. It's from Rachel, she said before Daniel could speak. My daughter. She wrote back. Daniel sat down beside her, his heart pounding. What does it say? I haven't opened it yet. I've been sitting here for an hour staring at it. Lauren looked at him with eyes full of fear. What if she's writing to tell me she never wants to hear from me again? What if this is her final rejection? Then you'll survive it, and you won't be alone. Daniel took her hand. But you'll never know unless you open it. Lauren stared at the envelope for another long moment. Then, with the decisive movement of someone leaping off a cliff, she tore it open. The letter was 3 pages long, written in careful handwriting that Lauren said she recognized from Rachel's childhood. Daniel watched her read, watched the emotions play across her face. Shock, pain, hope, and finally, tears that fell freely down her cheeks. She wants to meet, Lauren whispered when she finished. She says she got my letter months ago and couldn't respond at first. She was angry. She wanted to tear it up and pretend it never came. Lauren's voice broke. But then she read it again and again, and she started to wonder if maybe I'd actually changed, if maybe there was something worth salvaging. Lauren, that's wonderful. She wants to meet in person, in 2 weeks. She's flying to Chicago. Lauren looked at Daniel with an expression of pure terror. What do I do? What do I say to her? How do I make up for 20 years of— You don't, Daniel interrupted gently. You can't make up for the past. All you can do is show her who you are now, the person you've become, the family you've built. What if she doesn't like who I've become? Then at least she'll know the truth, and you'll have tried. Daniel squeezed her hand. That's all any of us can do, Lauren. Try and hope and show up even when we're terrified. Lauren leaned into him, her tears soaking into his shirt. I'm so scared, Daniel. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the thought of seeing my daughter again makes me want to hide under the bed. That's because she matters. The things that matter are always the scariest. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other while the afternoon light shifted and changed. When Emma came home from her summer day camp, she found them still on the couch and immediately demanded to know what was wrong. Nothing's wrong, Peanut, Daniel said. Something good happened. Lauren's daughter is coming to visit. Emma's eyes went wide. Rachel, the one from the cards? Lauren nodded, wiping her eyes. She wrote me a letter. She wants to meet. That's so exciting! Emma bounced on her toes. Can I meet her too? We can show her my room and the park and Lucky's Diner and all the places we go. We'll see, Peanut. Rachel is coming to see Lauren, and they have a lot to talk about. But we're family now, Emma said with the particular logic of an 8-year-old, and Rachel is Lauren's family. So she's our family too, right? Lauren looked at the small girl standing before her, this child who'd taught her more about love and connection than decades of therapy and self-help books ever had, and felt something crack open in her heart. Right, she whispered. She's our family too. The 2 weeks before Rachel's visit passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Lauren cleaned Daniel's apartment 3 times, rearranged the furniture twice, and changed her outfit for the meeting approximately 17 times before Emma finally intervened. You look pretty in all of them, Emma said firmly. Stop changing. She's going to like you because you're nice, not because of your shirt. When did you become the wise one in this family? Lauren asked. I've always been the wise one. You're just noticing now. Daniel bit back a laugh at the familiar exchange. Emma had used that line on him countless times, and marveled at how completely Lauren had been absorbed into their small family unit. Her mannerisms were rubbing off on Emma, and Emma's particular brand of no-nonsense wisdom was rubbing off on her. They were changing each other, shaping each other, becoming something new together. Rachel arrived on a Saturday afternoon in late August, taking a taxi from the airport to the coffee shop where Lauren had suggested they meet. Daniel had offered to come for moral support, but Lauren had declined. This needs to be just us, she'd said. At least at first. If it goes well, maybe you can meet her. But I need to do this part alone. So Daniel stayed home with Emma, both of them trying to distract themselves with games and television while their minds wandered to a coffee shop across the city where 2 women were trying to rebuild something that had been broken for years. The hours stretched like taffy, endless and excruciating. Emma asked every 15 minutes if Lauren had texted, and Daniel had to admit that he was checking his phone just as obsessively. Finally, at 6:47 p.m., a text arrived. Coming home. Bringing someone. Please have dinner ready for 4. Daniel read the message 3 times before its meaning fully registered. 4. Lauren was bringing Rachel back with her. Rachel was coming to their home. "Emma," he called, "help me figure out what we're making for dinner." They settled on spaghetti, Emma's specialty, if specialty could be applied to boiling noodles and heating jarred sauce, and were just finishing the preparations when they heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened and Lauren walked in. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling, that complicated smile that Daniel had seen before, full of joy and grief and hope, all tangled together. Behind her stood a young woman in her mid-20s, with Lauren's eyes and a stranger's face. Rachel was tall and slender, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and an expression that mixed uncertainty with something that might have been curiosity. "This is Rachel," Lauren said, her voice trembling slightly. "Rachel, this is Daniel and Emma." Emma, never one to stand on ceremony, walked directly up to Rachel and studied her with intense scrutiny. "You have the same eyes as Lauren," she announced, "but your nose is different. Did you get it from your dad?" Rachel blinked, clearly startled by the direct approach. Yes, I have my father's nose." "That's interesting. I have my mom's curls, but my daddy's chin. He says it's stubborn, which is why I'm stubborn." Emma nodded as if this settled something important. "Are you hungry? We made spaghetti. I'm going to arrange mine into a dinosaur." A surprised laugh escaped Rachel, a sound so similar to Lauren's that Daniel felt his heart skip. "You arrange your spaghetti into dinosaurs?" "Every time. It's tradition. Lauren does flowers because she's not as good at dinosaurs yet, but she's learning." Rachel looked at Lauren with an expression Daniel couldn't read. "You arrange your spaghetti into shapes?" "Emma taught me," Lauren said softly. "She teaches me a lot of things." Dinner was awkward at first, the silences stretching too long while everyone searched for safe topics. But Emma, blissfully unaware of adult tensions, chattered enough for all of them, filling the gaps with stories about school and friends and the elaborate mythology she'd developed around her stuffed animals. Gradually, Rachel relaxed. She answered Emma's questions. Yes, she lived in Seattle. Yes, she worked as a marine biologist. Yes, she had once seen a whale up close, and it was the most amazing thing ever. By the time the spaghetti dinosaurs and flowers had been devoured, something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. The tension hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had eased into something more like cautious hope. After dinner, Emma insisted on giving Rachel the full tour of the apartment, which took far longer than the small space warranted. Daniel used the time to help Lauren clean up, working side by side in the kitchen, while Rachel examined Emma's drawings and stuffed animal collection. "How are you doing?" Daniel asked quietly. Lauren's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. "I don't know, it's strange. She looks so much like she did as a child, but she's also completely different. A stranger who shares my DNA." She shook her head slowly. We talked for 4 hours at the coffee shop. She told me about her life, her job, her apartment, a boyfriend named Marcus, who she thinks might be the one. I missed all of it, Daniel. Her college graduation, her first heartbreak, her triumphs and failures. I missed everything that mattered. But you're here now. That has to count for something. She said that too, that she'd spent years being angry, but the anger was exhausting. That my letter made her realize she'd been waiting for me to change, and when she saw that I had, Lauren's voice broke. She said she wanted to try, that she wasn't ready to forgive everything, but she was ready to see if forgiveness might be possible. Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her while she cried. That's more than you hoped for. It's more than I deserved. After everything I did, everything I missed, she should hate me forever, but she's giving me another chance. Lauren turned in his arms, her eyes bright with tears. I don't know if I can do this, Daniel. Be the mother she needs. I don't know how. You do it the same way you've been learning to be part of our family. One day at a time, one conversation at a time, one moment of showing up at a time. Daniel wiped the tears from her cheeks. You've already proven you can change. Now you just have to keep proving it. Rachel stayed for 3 days, sleeping on the pull-out couch and gradually becoming part of the household routine. She and Emma developed an immediate bond, two people who'd both been shaped by complicated relationships with the women who raised them, finding unexpected kinship in their differences.
She's good with kids, Daniel observed to Lauren on the second night, watching Rachel help Emma build a tower out of blocks that they planned to dramatically destroy. She always was, even when she was young herself. Lauren's voice was soft with memory. She used to take care of the neighbors' children when she was barely old enough to babysit. I think she learned to nurture because I didn't nurture her. She became what I failed to be. Or she became who she was always meant to be, despite the obstacles. Lauren considered this. You're very generous with your interpretations. I've had a lot of practice finding silver linings. Single parenthood requires it. On Rachel's last evening, they all went to Lucky's Diner for dinner, the same booth where everything had started all those months ago when a misunderstood phrase had led to an unexpected meal with an unexpected family. Mom used to take me to fancy restaurants, Rachel told Emma, who was already arranging her grilled cheese into what she claimed was a castle. White tablecloths, multiple forks, waiters who judged you if you ordered wrong. That sounds terrible, Emma said with genuine sympathy. It was, actually. I always wanted to go somewhere like this. Somewhere with sticky tables and paper placemats and food you could actually enjoy without worrying about etiquette. Lauren winced. I thought I was giving you culture, sophistication. You were giving me anxiety. Rachel's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. But I understand now why you did it. You were trying to prepare me for the world you lived in. You just didn't realize I wanted to live in a different world. What world did you want? Rachel looked around the diner, at the cracked vinyl booths, the faded photographs on the walls, the elderly couple sharing a milkshake in the corner, and smiled. This one. The world where people are messy and imperfect and happy anyway. The world where a grilled cheese counts as fine dining if you're eating it with people you love. Lauren reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. I'm sorry I didn't give you this, but I'm glad you found it anyway. I'm glad too. Rachel squeezed her mother's hand. And I'm glad you found it eventually. Better late than never, right? They said goodbye at the airport the next morning. A small group gathered at the security checkpoint. Emma insisted on giving Rachel a handmade card with a drawing of their whole family. Stick figures labeled with names, including one marked Rachel, standing between Lauren and a figure that appeared to be a whale. The whale is because you're a marine biologist, Emma explained. I didn't know how to draw marine biology, so I drew what you study instead. Rachel laughed. That sounds so like Lauren's, and crouched down to Emma's level. This is the best present anyone has ever given me. I'm going to hang it in my office so everyone can see my family. Promise? Promise. Rachel stood and turned to Daniel, her expression thoughtful. Thank you, she said, for taking care of my mother, for showing her how to be different. I didn't show her anything. She figured it out herself. Maybe, but she figured it out because of you, because of Emma, because you gave her something worth changing for. Rachel glanced at Lauren, who was trying not to cry and failing spectacularly. I spent years waiting for her to become someone I could love again. I didn't think it was possible, but you proved me wrong. Daniel didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Rachel hugged Lauren for a long time, whispering something in her ear that made Lauren sob openly. Then she picked up her bag, walked through security, and disappeared into the crowd. Lauren stood staring at the checkpoint long after Rachel was gone, tears streaming down her face. She said she loves me, Lauren whispered, for the first time in 6 years. She said she loves me and she wants to try being a family again. Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. Then we'll try, all of us, together. Emma took Lauren's hand. That's what families do. They try together, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Lauren looked down at the 8-year-old who'd taught her more about love than anyone in her life and smiled through her tears. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise, Emma said seriously. You're just noticing now. Fall arrived, and with it came a question that Daniel had been turning over in his mind for weeks. He'd bought the ring in September, a simple diamond that had cost more than he should have spent, but felt absolutely necessary. He'd carried it in his pocket for nearly a month, waiting for the right moment, trying to plan the perfect proposal. But perfect moments, he was learning, didn't really exist. There were only real moments, messy and imperfect and full of possibility. The moment he chose was a Sunday afternoon in late October, almost exactly 1 year after that first misunderstood phrase had changed everything.
They were at the lake, watching Emma throw bread to ducks who were far too fat from similar offerings. The autumn light was golden, the air crisp with approaching winter, and Lauren was laughing at something Emma had said, that real laugh, the one that transformed her face into something radiant. Daniel didn't get down on one knee. He didn't make a speech. He just took Lauren's hand and said, "I want to do this forever, the three of us. Will you marry me?" Lauren's laugh died in her throat. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. "What?" "Marry me. Be my wife. Be Emma's official mother, not just the woman who braids her hair and eats spaghetti dinosaurs with her. Be my family, really and truly and legally." Daniel pulled out the ring, feeling suddenly foolish and terrified and more certain than he'd ever been about anything. "I know it's fast. I know there are complications. But I've spent the last year watching you become the person you always wanted to be, and I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without you." Lauren was crying again. She cried so much more easily now than she had when they'd met, her emotional walls completely demolished. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Emma called from the water's edge, where she'd clearly been eavesdropping. "Say yes so I can have a mom again," Lauren laughed through her tears. "Did you know about this?" "Daddy asked me first. He said I had to approve because I'm the most important person in the family." Emma walked over and took Lauren's other hand. "I approved, but only if you promise to keep making spaghetti flowers and come to all my plays and never leave like my first mom did." "I promise," Lauren said, her voice breaking. "I promise I'll never leave. Either of you." "Then say yes," Emma demanded. "Say yes right now." Lauren looked at Daniel, at this man who'd taken a terrible misunderstanding and turned it into the foundation for something beautiful. At this man who'd shown her that it was never too late to change, never too late to build a family, never too late to love. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes, yes, yes." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking. Emma cheered and did a victory dance that startled the ducks into flight, and Lauren pulled Daniel into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and the revolutionary possibility of happiness. They were married on a spring day 6 months later in a small ceremony by the lake where Daniel had proposed. Rachel flew in from Seattle and served as Lauren's maid of honor. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row and cried happy tears. Emma, who had insisted on being the flower girl, scattered rose petals with the precision of a military operation and the enthusiasm of a child who'd finally gotten everything she wanted. The ceremony was simple. No white tablecloths, no multiple forks, no waiters judging their choices. Just two people promising to love each other and a family witnessing the official beginning of something that had started with a misunderstanding and grown into something none of them could have predicted. After the ceremony, they held the reception at Lucky's Diner. Emma had insisted, and Lauren had agreed without hesitation. "It's where we became a family," she'd said. "It should be where we celebrate becoming one, officially." The diner's owner, who'd known Daniel for years, closed the restaurant for the evening and decorated it with white balloons and streamers. The wedding cake was from a fancy bakery. Lauren had drawn the line at having Dolores make it from scratch. But everything else was classic diner fare. Grilled cheese sandwiches and chocolate milkshakes and, at Emma's request, spaghetti arranged into celebratory shapes. "To family," Daniel said, raising his milkshake for a toast. "The kind you're born with and the kind you build. The kind that breaks apart and the kind that comes back together. The kind that surprises you when you least expect it." "To family," everyone echoed. Lauren caught Daniel's eye across the table, and in her expression he saw everything they'd survived to get here. The misunderstanding that had started it all, the walls they'd both built and then demolished, the fear and the hope, and the slow, patient work of learning to love again. "I have something to say," Lauren announced, standing up. "A year and a half ago, I asked a man to take me home. He heard something else, something that terrified him, because the world had taught him that people in power couldn't be trusted." Daniel felt his face flush, but Lauren continued. "That misunderstanding should have been the end of our story. Instead, it became the beginning, because Daniel didn't just assume the worst about me, he gave me a chance to explain, and then he gave me something even more valuable. He gave me a glimpse of what I'd been missing. A daughter who teaches through dinosaur facts and spaghetti art. A home that's warm even when the heating doesn't work properly. A family that chooses each other every day, even when it's hard. She looked at Emma, who was watching with rapt attention. I spent 20 years building a company. I thought that was my legacy. The buildings with my name on them, the employees who feared me, the success that everyone could measure. But I was wrong. My real legacy is this: the people in this room. The love I almost threw away and somehow got a second chance to keep. Lauren raised her glass. To second chances. And to the 7-year-old who told me that pancakes were important, she was right about that, and about everything else. Emma beamed. I told you I'm always right. The party continued late into the evening, long past Emma's bedtime and the usual closing hours of the diner. Rachel and Emma disappeared into a corner to continue their ongoing conversation about marine biology and whether it was possible to train a whale to do tricks. Mrs. Patterson regaled anyone who would listen with stories of Daniel's early days as a single father, including several incidents he'd hoped everyone had forgotten. And Daniel and Lauren sat in their favorite booth, the one where they'd first eaten together, where they'd brought Rachel, where they'd celebrated birthdays and survived crises and built a life, and marveled at how much had changed. A year ago, I thought my life was falling apart, Daniel said quietly. I thought I was about to lose everything. So did I, Lauren admitted. I was so alone, Daniel. So empty. I'd convinced myself that the loneliness was just the price of success. And now? Now I know better. Now I know that success without connection is just another form of failure. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving. You saved yourself. I just showed you what was possible. By taking me home that night, by letting me into your world. Lauren smiled. What if you'd said no? What if you'd just dropped me off and driven away? Where would we be now? I don't know, but I'm glad I didn't. Daniel kissed the top of her head. I'm glad I took a chance on a woman who terrified me. I'm glad Emma saw something I couldn't see yet. I'm glad we're here, together, building something that matters. Me too. Lauren's voice was soft with contentment. Me too. Outside the diner's windows, Chicago glittered with a million lights. A city of ambition and exhaustion, of success and failure, of people searching for connection in a world that often felt impossibly cold. But inside this small restaurant with its cracked vinyl booths and paper placemats, warmth radiated from every corner. A family sat together. A family that had been broken and rebuilt, that had stumbled into existence through misunderstanding and grown into something real through choice. A family that proved it was never too late to start over, never too late to heal, never too late to love. Emma fell asleep on Rachel's shoulder, her flower girl dress rumpled and her hair escaping from the careful braids Lauren had done that morning. Rachel looked down at her with an expression of wonder. This child who'd adopted her without question, who'd expanded her understanding of what family could be. She's amazing, Rachel whispered to Lauren. You're lucky to have her. I know, Lauren whispered back. I'm lucky to have all of you. Daniel watched the three of them, his daughter, his stepdaughter, his wife, and felt something settle in his chest. The last remnants of the fear he'd carried for years finally dissolved, replaced by something steadier, something that felt like peace. He'd started this journey as a drowning man, barely keeping his head above water while trying to raise a daughter alone. He'd walked into that office, expecting to lose everything, and walked out with the beginning of something he couldn't have imagined. And now, watching his family laugh and love and exist together in this imperfect, beautiful chaos, Daniel understood something important. Sometimes the things that sound like threats turn out to be invitations. Sometimes the moments that terrify us become the foundations for our greatest joy. Sometimes all it takes is one misunderstood phrase, one leap of faith, one 7-year-old who knows that pancakes are important and rules about love are dumb. Sometimes that's all it takes to build a family. The evening wound down slowly, reluctantly, no one quite ready to let go of the magic. Eventually, they carried a sleeping Emma out to the car and drove through the quiet streets to their apartment. Still Daniel's old apartment, though they'd started looking at houses, something with a yard for Emma and a room for Rachel when she visited. Daniel carried Emma to bed while Lauren changed out of her wedding dress and into the worn t-shirt she'd started keeping in his dresser months ago. When he emerged from Emma's room, he found her standing at the living room window, looking out at the city. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Everything. Nothing. How strange life is." She leaned back into him. "I was thinking about that night in my office. How close we came to missing this entirely. But we didn't. No, we didn't." She turned in his arms, her face illuminated by the city lights. "I love you, Daniel Brooks. I love our daughter and our family and this ridiculous life we've built from nothing. I love you too, Lauren Brooks." He smiled at her new name, still unfamiliar. "Thank you for taking a chance on a terrified single dad who couldn't even get through a presentation without messing up. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely CEO who'd forgotten how to be human." She kissed him softly. "I think we saved each other. I think Emma saved us both. We should probably give her credit. She already knows. She tells us constantly how wise she is." Daniel laughed, pulling her closer. "She's not wrong." They stood there for a long time, holding each other while the city hummed around them. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who'd built something beautiful from the ruins of their separate fears. And in the small bedroom down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming of dinosaurs and spaghetti and the family that had chosen her as completely as she had chosen them. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. A new day was coming, the first day of the rest of their lives together. It was going to be a good one.